Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Lake Forest Council meeting, November 7th, 2017, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Invocation.
Our invocation tonight will be led by Chaplain Serena Cummings, Orange County Sheriff's Department.
Good evening, and thank you for blessing us.
Thank you. Would you please join me in prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, what an honor it is to have the freedom we have in this country, not only to worship you as we choose, but to come together openly in prayer. May we remember and give thanks for the men and women that have fought and continue to fight for this freedom. As the mayor, city council members, and community members gather here this evening, may you grant wisdom, discernment, guidance over all the decisions on the agenda set before them. May you increase productivity, cooperation, and respect for one another as the evening proceeds. And may you continue to use each person serving on this board and within this community in unique and positive ways as they seek to benefit the greater good of Lake Forest, a city that many call home. We are grateful for your presence here today, and we thank you for your continued provision. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, and God bless. Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Andrew Hamilton.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brings us, do we have anything from closed session report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, council members, the council gave direction in closed session for the city to join an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, being filed by a number of cities in Orange County in the federal case Higginson versus Becerra and the city of Poway. This is a case challenging the constitutionality of the California Voting Rights Act. That brief will be filed no later than November 17th.
Thank you. That brings us to Toro Chargers. Let's hear all that El Toro has been up to.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Sarah Dahlstrom here, reporting to you on the past and upcoming events at El Toro. In sports news, our boys varsity football team plays their first round of CIF this Friday at Villa Park. If they win this Friday, then our next game will be a home game next Friday. Good luck, boys. Also, girls varsity volleyball closed their season in their second round of CIF last week, defeated by the Esperanza Aztecs. Great season, ladies. In recent news, it's canned food drive time. We kicked off our annual canned food drive yesterday, and we're off to a great start. Myself and Commissioner of Community Service, Zachary Waterman, are chairing the canned food drive this year and would appreciate all the help we can get. Last year, we exceeded our goal and collected about 111,000 cans. This year, we're ready to work even harder to break our record and to achieve our goal of collecting 115,000 cans. Every day for the next 2 weeks, thanks to the help of our mayor, ASB will be collecting cans outside of Lake Forest Ralph's, El Toro Ralph's, and Muirlands Albertsons from 2 to 8 p.m. on school days, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends. Feel free to stop by and say hi and donate any canned goods. Our big collection day is next Friday, November 17th, where we will take over the entire Upper Quad into loading up dry and canned goods to our two organizations, South County Outreach and Adopt a Neighbor. The entire school gets involved into loading up all the trucks and cranes, and it's truly an awesome time. We couldn't do this without the help of our elementary and middle schools in the SVUSD district as well, where they can contribute all their cans to ours. We are so excited for these next 2 weeks to make our impact, and don't forget to bring in your cans. In other news, after the camp food drive, our Chargers are off for Thanksgiving break from November 18th to November 26th. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Well, that's all I have for tonight. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great evening, and as always, go Chargers.
You know, Sarah, we are so proud of the El Toro students and what you guys do there to make us look like such a great city, because you guys are overachievers in everything that you guys do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
That brings us to presentations. I'll receive a motion.
Move the presentations.
Second.
All in favor?
That motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 2, Recognition of Lake Forest businesses named in the Orange County Register's Best of OC Award Program, submitted by Assistant to the City Manager.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. So staff has provided a brief report for you this evening highlighting the businesses that were recognized by the Orange County Register as the Best of OC. After some introductory comments from my colleague Adrian, we'd like to ask the Mayor to join staff at the podium to award the certificates. This will be followed by a group photo of all the businesses with the entire City Council.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I am Adrian Grijalva from the Economic Development Division, and I'm here this evening to honor the fantastic Lake Forest businesses that were recently recognized as category winners in the OC Register's book of Best of OC. The Orange County Register's Best of OC is an annual publication that recognizes Orange County's finest places to eat, sleep, shop, play, and visit as chosen by OC Register readers. This year's publication gathered over 120,000 votes in approximately 100 categories. As we all know, Lake Forest is home to some of the best businesses in Orange County. I'm happy to announce that 9 Lake Forest businesses won first place in their respective categories. This evening, we would like to recognize those businesses and congratulate them on their success. Mr. Mayor, will you please join me down here? I will now call each business up individually to receive their certificate and pose for a photo with the Mayor. As I call your business name, please come forward. Please remain up here for a group photo at the end with all of our council members. And now for our award-winning businesses. The winner of the Best Senior Living Community category was Freedom Village Continuing Care Retirement Community. And I believe they were unable to make it to tonight's meeting. Our next category winner will be for the Best Home Improvement category, and the winner of that is the Home Depot.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, men like to shop too, and Home Depot is my favorite shopping place to go. So both of these managers know me well because I'm in there shopping every chance I get. Congratulations, guys. Congratulations.
5 in the morning a lot of times, so you never know.
And you know, we like to keep our houses looking nice in Lake Forest, and Home Depot has all your housing needs. So congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. And you know, Home Depot not only is a vendor in our city, but the fact is they actually give back to the city of Lake Forest. When the trees at El Toro graduation, Home Depot provides the trees behind that. Many of the elementary schools, Rancho Pinata, La Madera, all use trees and bushes that are on loan from Home Depots on Woodhill Ranch and El Toro. I have to shop at both of them because there's a competition going here, so they make sure that I shop at both their stores. So thank you for being part of our community. It really means a lot to us.
We also do a lot with Team Depot, where we actually give back to the vendors. So people that are not able to actually help themselves. We'll partner with Habitat in Team Depot events. We replace roofs, siding, driveways, name it for veterans that aren't able to do that for themselves. Your business and support helps us to help give back to you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for being part of our community. Congratulations.
Yep, just right back there. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, and our next category is going to be Best Mexican Restaurant category, and the winner for that is Avila's El Ranchito. And they actually have...
And, you know, not only do they have 2 El Ranchitos in Lake Forest, they live, they shop and dine in Lake Forest, and so they're part of our community too. So I love Mexican food. It's my favorite food, and this is my favorite restaurant, so thank you and congratulations.
And our next category winner is going to be for the Best Coffee House category, and the winner is Starbucks Coffee. I don't think they were able to make it tonight, but we'll give them a round of applause. Next up, for Best Barbecue category, is Lucille's Smokehouse Barbecue. Again, they were unable to make it, but we'll give them a round of applause. The placing first place in the Best Juice Bar category is Nectar Juice Bar.
You know, none of us eat enough fruits or vegetables, and so at Nectar you can get it all in one serving. So congratulations.
And a big congratulations to Goodwill of Orange County for placing first in Best Thrift Store category.
Goodwill loved Lake Forest so much that they moved from El Toro to over there up on Rockfield and expanded. And so we're blessed to have you in our city. So thank you. Congratulations.
Next up is first place in the Best Pet Supplies category, and that is Pet Country. And a big congratulations to the Jewelry Box of Lake Forest for placing first in the Best Jewelry Store category.
And they will be in the back of the room for autographs after the meeting. We all know them because of their great commercials, and so thank you guys for being part of our community and being so involved with us. Congratulations. So, you know, diamond rings need to be shining. So my wife goes to Jewelry Mart to get it shined, and also the new, where the prongs that you guys replaced for us. All your jewelry needs. Jewelry Mart here in Lake Forest. Thank you guys.
Okay, and now at this time, I would like to invite all of our council members to join us for a group photo.
Thank you guys, and congratulations to you all. Thank you.
So congratulations once again to all of the winners, and thank you for your excellent service and locating your business in Lake Forest. We wish you continued success and prosperity.
If I can add just one small thing. A few months ago, we had a family who had a fire in their garage. Something had caught fire, and it burned up their garage and a section of their home, and they were rendered homeless until their home could get fixed. And one of the businesses that we just honored this evening was so generous and gave a substantial amount of money so that this family could go have a nice meal while they're stuck in a hotel room while their house got fixed. And that was Avila's Il Ranchito. And I just want to say thank you. That was so kind and so generous to help that family. And it just shows the caliber of businesses we have in this community, that we care enough about our people that we would help them in such a time of need. So thank you especially.
Thank you to you all, and congratulations.
Agenda item 3, introduction of new employee, Taylor Abernath, Principal Civil Engineer, submitted by Director of Public Works, City Engineer.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'd like to introduce Taylor Abernath. Come on up, Taylor. I promised I'd do that to him. He's our new principal civil engineer. He's a registered professional. He's got over 10 years of experience, both on the private sector as a consultant and in public works. He's going to work primarily on our capital improvement project, so he's got plenty of work to do. And just want to introduce and please welcome Taylor.
Thank you for having me, and look forward to serving the city of Lake Forest.
And for the people in the audience, where are you coming from?
Most recently from the city of Orange.
So, okay, well, we'd love to have you work, live, and play in Lake Forest, and so welcome to Lake Forest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda Item 4, Introduction of New Employee, Charlene de la Paz, Senior Management Analyst, submitted by Director of Management Services.
Mayor and City Council, I'd like to introduce Charlene de la Paz, who's our new Senior Management Analyst in the Public Safety Division of the Management Services Department. In this role, Charlene will be responsible for emergency management, public safety, community programs, massage licensing, and other public safety-related programs. She also worked closely with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, assisting in their budgeting and purchasing needs. Charlene comes to the City of Lake Forest from the City of Pomona, where she served as a Senior Management Analyst in the Public Works Department. And prior to that, Charlene spent approximately 11 years working in the police departments of the cities of Placentia and Corona, where she served in various capacities, such as the Management Analyst and Senior Management Analyst. Charlene received her Bachelor's of Arts in Finance from Cal State Fullerton and her Master's in Public Administration from Cal Baptist University. And so we're very excited to have Charlene. We believe she'll be a great asset to the city, and we want to welcome her along with Taylor earlier. So please join me in welcoming Charlene.
Welcome to Lake Forest. We're glad to have you. And you got, we don't expect you to fill the shoe size of Jim Rim, but the fact is you're welcome to be here, and we're thankful that you're going to be here representing our city with law enforcement and community service. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the very warm welcome and introduction, and I look forward also to serving the residents here.
All right. I'm sure you'll be impressed because we're a great place to live. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That concludes presentation. So at this time, public comments. Members of the public may address the City Council regarding any items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Lake Forest. No action shall be taken on items not listed on the agenda unless authorized by law. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person with an overall time limit of 30 minutes for the public comment portion of the agenda. Any person wishing to address the City Council on any matter, whether or not it appears on the agenda, is requested to complete a request to speak form at the door on the side and complete it and submit it to Carlo. When you are called to speak, you will have 3 lights. The first being green. You'll have 1 minute left. The light will turn yellow, and when your time has expired, it will turn red. At that time, your public comment period has ended, and we request that you conclude your comments and save any future comments for future meetings. Madam Clerk, have we had any from the public?
Yes, Your Honor. Terry Anderson, followed by Karen Shore.
Good evening.
Good evening. Madam, gentlemen, after seeing your recent decision to drop the future discussion and support for the emerging Lake Forest Boys and Girls Club, I felt it necessary to stand before you and ask you the question everyone that I know and that is familiar with this project wants to know: why? In April of this year, the Council was presented a compelling presentation by both community leaders and Boys and Girls Club executives to bring nationally recognized and acclaimed nonprofit organization to our city just for our kids. The need is great. The financial cost to the city was zero. That is, zero, which I think is unheard of in projects that are brought before this city. And all that was asked was that the city assist in finding a place. You directed city staff to find options. They suggested El Toro Park, a fine option since it was exactly where we had the greatest need. With 1,000+ kids at Gates Elementary and 500+ kids at Olivewood Elementary, the club would be right where we need it, right where the kids are. You asked city staff to estimate costs. They estimated $400,000 plus in infrastructure costs. Boys and Girls Club estimated structural costs between $500,000 and $1 million. The city's part of that expenditure, zero. Boys and Girls Club was paying for all of it. Are you aware that for every dollar invested through Boys and Girls Clubs in this country, $10 is brought back to the community in current and future earnings? 10 to 1. Does any other program that we run give us that kind of return on investment? I ask you that. That means that your no vote has rejected a potential $10 million plus gift to our city. We're spending millions of dollars on new parks for Lake Forest, and that's fantastic. We're spending millions of dollars on dog parks and senior citizen programs and facilities that we truly need. That's fantastic. We run after-school programs for our junior high kids, and it's a great program. But lastly, we give over $400,000 each year to Saddleback Unified to run an after-school program called Kids Factory, which gives us an unknown return. Kids are supervised by high schoolers, everything is done outside, and it goes until 4:30, weather permitting. When was the last time that we got true assessment of that program? No one seems to have a true answer as to the quality or quantity of services received for those dollars spent. Plenty of anecdotal evidence exists from elementary schools that I know and probably some that you know, that kids don't really like going to Kids Factory. Parents, too, have spoken to me about how they feel the program is completely lacking. I have in my hand, right here, testimonials from 17 different families who've attended Boys and Girls programs for the last 4 summers. Every one of them says the same thing, that they want more of this kind of programming. I ask each of you to rethink your decision on not unanimously voting in favor of assisting our Boys and Girls Club here in Lake Forest. Don't turn your back on the kids of this community.
Thank you for your comments.
Karen Shore.
Hang on before we go on. Terry, just, you can keep walking back, but I'm going to respond to your answer. I want everyone to know that I voted yes for the Boys and Girls Club. I think it's really important for our city. I think it's important for the children. And being a child of I was a latchkey kid, and it was miserable. We had a lot of time on our hands that we shouldn't have had if we'd had programs like the Boys and Girls Club. You know, I think that we would have done better. And if you think of it, these children are future taxpayers, they're future voters, and hopefully they'll be future contributors to our society. And it's shown that the Boys and Girls Club has fantastic results for that. You end up growing up with responsible adults, and I think it's important.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a no from the other day, but I'm not going to give up on it. I think it's a worthy cause, and if I have to keep fighting, I'll keep fighting, because I think this is very important.
Councilman Gardner?
Yeah, just to answer your question, a couple of months ago we set up a committee working with Saddleback Valley Unified School District to deal with a whole bunch of issues. One of them was the Boys and Girls Club and the use of the schools. We got information back from our staff who were meeting with their staff that the Boys and Girls Club had not approached the district about using the schools. And we were under the impression from the Boys and Girls Club that they had approached the district. They had been told they couldn't, and therefore they needed a place to expand to. So based on the information we got from Saddleback Valley Unified School District, staff were instructed to get back to the Boys and Girls Club and ask them to go back to the district, who said they haven't talked about this. So I believe the vote was to ask the Boys and Girls Club to go back to the district and talk to the district about the use of those facilities. So it wasn't to stop it from going forward, but we were going forward on the basis that we thought the district had said no. The district is saying they didn't say no, come back and ask us.
Okay, wait, we're not back and forth. So Councilman Hamilton or Councilman Robinson?
I expressed a little bit the evening of our, I guess the afternoon of our strategic plan workshop, that I really didn't like the process for how we voted for or against things. Frankly, there was no vote. I joined with Mayor Pro Tem Basil in supporting this item. The two of us were the only ones that did, but there was no vote. It was just, are there 3 yes votes to move forward? I really didn't like the process, so I will be agendizing this for an actual vote that can be taken between all of us at a later date. I think that's the proper way to handle an item of this magnitude, and each one of us should go on the record with a yes or no vote. And frankly, there should be more discussion than probably the at most 3 or 4 minutes that we discussed it during that meeting. So sounds like there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that some council members may have been relying on certain information to base that very quick, really no comment rather than a vote one way or another. And so, I'd like to give us all the opportunity to dive in as deep as we need to. So at the appropriate time, I'll be asking to agendize that.
Councilman Hamilton?
So I just wanted to say, Terry, thank you for coming. I don't see you. You're here still. There you are. Okay. I actually agree with almost everything you said. The two main points I think I would counter are that this is a public park, and we've got lots of nonprofits in Lake Forest. I'm actually on the board of 2 of them that are based here in Lake Forest. And I just kind of have a hard time getting over a nonprofit organization, taking a substantial presence in a park. We only have a limited number of parks. And if every nonprofit were afforded that kind of presence in a city-owned park, I think we wouldn't have any parks left. That's A. B, I've heard numerous complaints about that area and how this is really the only park in that neighborhood. Folks who live in that neighborhood have expressed those concerns, and so, if there's another place, I don't know. Like I've said, I've kind of philosophically against a park. I've also talked to 2 members of the governing board at Saddleback Unified, and they said they're very open to having the Boys and Girls Club come. So I want to be able to show you that I do have concerns about some of the things, but I generally agree with many of the things that you mentioned. I guess it's just a little troubling to me, and I know you want to have community outreach, but I saw on Facebook that you ran, ads against the council members, both the El Toro, the Tour del Toro, and the Boys and Girls Club. So I want to see if I can't extend an olive branch that maybe we try and work this out, and we don't have to make it such a publicized and confrontational maybe ad. So yeah, I think it's important that we get along in our community, and you have every right to do an ad. It's just it was a confrontational piece, so I don't think we need that in our city. So,
ladies and gentlemen, and Terry, it's not that we're against the Boys and Girls Club. Lake Forest was founded as the community of El Toro. This was one of the first community parks in the city of El Toro, in the oldest part of El Toro. And this park runs a long, narrow strip of land between Muirlands and Rockfield. And the only big, square, flat area of land is the corner of the 2 acres that the Boys and Girls Club wanted to come and pave over and make a parking lot and put a 60-foot by 20-foot double-wide mobile home there. And it's along our major corridor of Muirlands and Los Lisos, the border of Mission Viejo. I'm not against the Boys and Girls Club. I support the Boys and Girls Club, and I've actually been at the grand opening of when Tustin had their grand opening. But the fact is, to give an open space, a way to be utilized as a Boys and Girls Club, but not for profit, is the wrong place and for us as a city to be involved in. On the ad hoc committee that me and Councilman Gardner sit on, we've gone over and reviewed the amount of money that we spend in outreach and support of our children of Lake Forest. We have, in every elementary school in Lake Forest, we have a kids factory, which is for $25 a year, you can have your child stayed from the time the school ends till 4:35 is Kids Factory. We have a bus at Los Lisos and at Serrano Junior High that picks up kids from junior high and buses them to the sports park for Teen Lounge. So we give back in a big way to the community of Lake Forest and our children, because these are responsibilities that we're not there to teach our children. We're a municipality. The school district is supposed to be teaching our children. I feel that we want to be good neighbors and we want to support our kids, and we don't want latchkey kids. That's why we make the availability of allowing kids that can't afford the Saddleback Unified School District, TLC, which is hundreds of dollars a week. They can have Kids Factory, where when you have two working families or a single mom that's working late, they can have a safe place to stay and be watched. And so that's what we make available. All the new flashing lights at all the crossings of Lake Forest, City of Lake Forest paid for those flashing lights so that our kids had a safe path to school. The crossing guards of Lake Forest are paid for by the City of Lake Forest because it's important for us that our kids get to school safety and get home safely. So it's not, I think it was the location. It meant a lot to me as someone who attends the League of Cities and ACCOC conventions, how important these parks are to our communities, open space. And that is the only open space in that quadrant of the city, which is the oldest part of Lake Forest, the old El Toro area of Rockfield and Los Lisos. That park is a huge benefit to the community and the children and the families that go out and enjoy that park in the evenings, afternoons, and during the day. So that's why, and so thank you, and I'm sorry for next speaker.
Karen Shore, followed by Sharon Oda.
Okay. That is a beautiful spot on our side of the tracks, I have to say. I love that corner.
I agree. I like it too.
My name is Karen Shore, and I live on Respite Drive, which runs along Village Pond Park. I am one of many Lake Forest residents who look forward to the future enjoyment of this special park. Since 2012, I've been involved in the Lake Forest-sponsored citizen group to provide input regarding the renovation of Village Pond Park. This year, we have watched the progression of this amazingly complex project. Now look forward to someday having a park we can all enjoy. In July of this year, I read in the Orange County Register that our City Council approved a name change of Village Pond Park to Veterans Park. I also learned that a Veterans Memorial Monument was approved and citizens were invited to attend planning meetings for the monument's design. I contacted several of my neighbors to participate in these meetings with me, and they agreed. All of them participated in the earlier park renovation group. None were aware, like me, of the park's name change or the change to the park design with the addition of a Veterans Memorial. I then reviewed the video of the city on the city website of the City Council meeting dated July 18th of Agenda Item 16 regarding renaming of Village Pond Park, adding a monument there, and the re-monumenting of Heroes Park, along with consideration of city planning of events to take place there. 3 veteran citizens spoke at the City Council meeting supporting the name change of Village Pond Park and adding the monument. Councilman Robinson read his lengthy, emotionally stirring speech in support of renaming the park. A copy of that speech was handed out to all council members to read along as Mr. Robinson read his speech. A vote quickly ensued, unanimously approving the speech as a revision of the earlier motion, to my understanding. As an aside, the approved final motion, as drafted, was not made available to the public on the city website afterwards. There was no prior invitation to the general public to that council meeting. I assume someone made sure to invite a veterans group to that council meeting to provide their public opinions. Don't citizens besides veterans deserve the opportunity to voice their opinions on these matters? The discussion lacked any mention of maintaining the park's name. I feel this was disrespectful to all citizens, though particularly to the previous efforts put forth by the citizens of the park renovation group. I came tonight to voice my genuine disappointment of the vote outcome, but particularly the proceeding process of that vote. I feel council members may have let sentimentality cloud their judgment, which curtailed any meaningful discussion that night. I feel the additional expense to a park name change and modifications of plans for Village Pond Park is not a prudent use of taxpayer money. Surely the new City Hall would be a more desirable venue for a patriotic monument. I feel the motion as approved regarding Heroes Park was ill-considered. The expense to provide lengthy
Please wrap
signage
up.
naming all ballpark fields after 4 specific heroes in that park appeared to be an afterthought, again lacking any further meaningful discussion of merit of that project. I respectfully request the council to consider a readdress of the motion previously approved after adequately seeking input from the cities of Lake Forest. Thank you.
Karen, to that point, we usually have public input meetings, and the fact is there was a community outreach on the development and where we were going to go with the Village Pond Park, and this was something that was thrown on, and we haven't had the ability to have the input of the community around there. So at the end of this meeting, I will be calling for a community input meeting and to form you and have the community come and speak and what you guys think of what you want there, because we had meetings where many of us showed up and we're at the process of where we went through to develop what we have as design, and at one council meeting we sprang something on you and changed, and so for that we should come back and readdress.
That would be appreciated, and the city has the listserv for that group, which they developed in the first place.
So thank you for coming here and speaking that to us.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I just want to also say that, I've enjoyed conversing. I can't remember what medium it was. Maybe it was texting. I think we've had some conversations too. But and I certainly hear you loud and clear. I think Councilman Robinson's intent was noble. I think at the same time, having community input on the renaming, like you've mentioned, is very important, and I'll support revisiting that, and with still the intent of trying to honor our veterans too. So thanks for conversing with you and I. I've talked to staff a few times about this, and I think Scott, I don't know if he's called you yet, but I've been told Scott was going to reach out with you. He has? Okay. So I hear you. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Just to back up on springing it on the public and trying to hide something, the decision or the thought of changing the name was listed in several articles on the patch. It appeared at least for the last 4 or 5 months in the monthly newsletter I send out to thousands of Lake Forest residents. It appeared in my monthly report, which is published on the patch. It was advertised in the agenda. We formed a committee. That committee has met 3, I believe 4 times now. That was also publicized. After each meeting, the results of that meeting were publicized, and pictures of what the committee was planning were publicized. So and that was open to anybody, and sometimes a dozen people showed up, sometimes 6 people showed up to the meetings, but I cannot imagine how we could have done more to talk about it and to reach out to people and involve people in the process. In all the committee meetings we had, I believe that Karen was the only one that objected to the name change. I have heard a few other people object to the name change, but I don't think it would be accurate to say that it was done in hiding or sprung on anybody.
I just had a quick question. Director Wasserman, after we renamed the park, was a notice sent out to the residents around Village Pond Park informing them how oftentimes, like with Saddleback Ranch Road and their updates, was anything sent out to the residents of that community after our vote?
No.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question. Was anything sent to the residents before the vote? Like a mailing?
Before the vote, advising that there would be a vote?
Right.
No.
A possible name change.
No.
That's kind of where I respect your outreach. I wouldn't expect the city to depend on that to reach many citizens, and so especially the ones impacted by it.
Next speaker.
Sharon Oda, followed by Pete Shore.
Council members, Mayor, thank you very much for the opportunity. I, too, would like to address the issue on the Village Pond Park. And I live right on the park. My house is on the corner on Respite. And no, we didn't know anything about the name change. I did see Dr. Gardner's blog about it's all of a sudden the name change is to Veterans Park. So yes, I wish we would have had a letter addressed to the people around the park to let us know, or at least get some input from the people or the community itself, but we didn't do that. But my concern is the memorial that we're talking about putting on into the park, and that memorial is taking on a life of its own. It started out to be something small, and now it's growing larger and larger and larger. And I did attend one of the meetings for the Memorial Park, for the monument, and it was printed on some of the on the internet what we decided. And one of the things here, it says that the general consensus was that the memorial area should not be designed for picnics, eating, and other activities that would cause litter, which is true. But the way that the monuments are being designed right now, there's benches, there's 4 benches, there's also 5 monuments. It is a playground for children to come. It's also an invitation for people who park on the Ridge Route to stop their cars and come over and open up their picnic basket and eat lunch in front of the monuments. This is not what we want. We want to honor the veterans, and we want to keep it sacred. So this, again, it's getting so out of hand that we need to go back to it and relook at it and keep it smaller and an individual monument or something. But we can't let it go as it is. And so I'd like the council members please to relook at this and see if we really need to do what we're doing with it right now.
Thank you for your comments, and thanks for being involved.
Pete Shore, followed by Bob Holtzclaw.
For your information, it's coming to the council next week. So it'll be in the agenda. It'll be online, so you'll be able to come and make the comments when we when we discuss it on the agenda. Not next week, but in 2 weeks.
And Scott, if it's possible, can you send a preemptive notice to the residents of Village Pond Park area so they know about next meeting?
Yes.
We'll come back to you on that when we make our motion.
All right, thank you for all your service to our great city.
Your name?
My name is Pete Shore.
Thank you, Mr. Shore.
I'm here also regarding Village Pond Park. I'm very dissatisfied with the decision that was made to change the name and to put the memorial there. I think it was not brought out, as Jim says, to the general public in a way that people near the park or people who were involved in the lengthy planning process of that park were made aware that these changes were going to happen. Everything was in place approximately October of last year. We had all the park designs let out from the city, put on the website. No mention, no idea that any memorial was going to be there. No mention that a name might be changed. That's a historical name for this city. Everyone knows that park. And I'm very dissatisfied with the decision to change the name. I'm all in favor of veterans. I think we should do something to honor them in a very respectful way. I kind of get the idea that this was a serene park and that, you know, it might be a good place to put a memorial for the veterans. But I think you guys just made a terrible decision here. It's a small park. The plan was to have a very quiet, nature-type park that did not attract large amounts of people. There was some discussion before about having events for the veterans. Well, why don't you put it in our new
sports park?
Not this. No, I think that's wrong.
Okay.
We shouldn't have these things in our park. Put it out at where our new Civic Center. Thank you very much. The Civic Center. You can have a place for people to park. You can have events for the veterans there. You can do something that's meaningful. You do something like you did over at Heroes Park. I mean, you guys didn't do it. I'm not blaming you for that one. But you go over to Heroes Park, and there's this little monument there, basically hidden from people. You don't even know it's there. It's covered up by rose bushes right now. The light doesn't even light the flag. And we're talking about putting a flag in our park. Put a light on it. It'd destroy the park. I think you need to rethink it. Maybe scrap the plans. It's not in yet. You don't have to put the memorial there. You don't have to rename this park. Let it be what the members of this community wanted it to be. A quiet, serene nature park. Nothing special in there. Nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shore, for your comments.
Bob Holtzclaw.
Bob Holtzclaw, resident of Lake Forest. Recently we had a meeting of our 5-year plan, but nothing was really accomplished. Traffic is our biggest problem in this city. And a little bit has actually been done about it. We passed the buck on committees that went nowhere. We even appointed a high school coach that got the job claiming he counts the seconds it takes a light to change. Next, we gave it to the Planning Commission, but there's not one engineer on the board. Some of them don't even know how many square feet in an acre. I think it's time we appoint the people responsible for all this traffic. Robinson, Hamilton, and Voights. I'll even let you hire some real engineers to help, road engineers. Not from the city, because I think some of them have come from the finest high schools in the county, but this is a bigger problem. I don't even think the county could really help. I watched them try to repack a hillside 3 times, and they finally plastic wrapped it. I would like to hear a motion appointing all 3 of you as one committee, and I want it to be open to the public. The 3 of you are the direct cause of all the traffic that we have in the city right now. And the only person that actually benefited from all this is the developers. They made millions of dollars off of all this. And you quite frankly, made thousands of dollars in your campaign coffers. But how did the residents of Lake Forest benefit from all this? While we're sitting in traffic, no problem at all, and I hear some of you are writing down something. I don't know if you guys are writing stick pictures or what, but nothing has ever been done on it, and we actually need some real traffic engineering on this roads. This is ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor, we have exceeded the 30-minute time limit for public comment. I did receive one additional one just as this last speaker was up.
And this will be the last speaker then that will receive that.
David Glick.
Mr. Glick, come forward, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate that. Mine's real brief. David Glick, resident of Lake Forest, mayor, council. Just a couple of things. I had to leave the strategic planning group you had to attend the new Veterans Cemetery in Irvine, which is a great event. And so again, a lot of the things I didn't hear about, of course, the traffic and what have you. But a couple of things. Going back, let's say the last month or 2 months, I was involved in the Veteran Pond Park, or something that had to do with naming that park and keeping the original name somewhere in that body. We had a community gathering when we decided on what we were going to do with the park. And I was under the assumption that, again, we would have the homeowners of my community, of Lake Forest 1, have some kind of a say into this. And again, nothing ever happened. So I mean, I think we kind of dropped the ball on that. I really think the there should be the homeowner should have influence on naming the park. We have, again, we have a lot of parks now in this area, but it's our community. I know it's city land, but it's our community. Just something that would, I think the residents should be involved. The only other thing I just found out some people came to my house today and was talking about, which I didn't know about, that the Boys and Girls Club was denied. That's a real thumbs down, guys. So I'm not real involved in it. I haven't heard what went on, but something we really need in the community, and I'm hearing it from many people. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
We've had no further requests.
Councilman Robinson.
So, just to address the issue, because there were a few speakers on the name change, agreeing with Councilmember Gardner, we communicated in a variety of different ways. Did we communicate every way we possibly can? No, we didn't. And if we want to do that on the next agenda item, I'm okay with that, but it shouldn't be specific to this issue. We should be talking about systematically how do we communicate about everything. The last public commenter just said he loved the Boys and Girls Club. I do too, right? But what about the residents that live around that park? Some of them might not like it, right? So how do I balance, how do I weigh all of that? Some of these parks are neighborhood parks. Some of these parks are, I think destination is a little too big of a word, but they're a little bit more city-wide parks. They're parks that residents from all throughout Lake Forest spend time in. So it's a lot. It doesn't happen as much, say, for instance, in Ranchwood Park. That's just in one little few streets around it, and it doesn't get that same traffic, right? But Village Pond Park always has. El Toro Park always has. El Toro 2, which became Heroes Park, always has been getting people from throughout the community. So when we were looking at this, this was not just an off-the-cuff thing. There was a question about why wasn't my speech or my comments, why weren't they in the record? When I put together motions, sometimes rather than trying to state them verbally, I will write them out so that my colleagues know exactly what my motion is. So I wrote the motion out word for word so that they would understand exactly what I was hoping to accomplish. I didn't invite any groups. The publication from the city is how that's communicated. And again, should we do more? I think that's a question we need to ask on every single agenda item. So if you want to do it, we should do it on all of them. We shouldn't be singling out, because then we'll just get criticized for not doing that. And that will become a very significant communication effort. And I'm not opposed to having that discussion on whether we should move that direction, but I think that we shouldn't be doing it in a one-off fashion. We should be determining whether or not that's a systematic approach that we want to take to how we're going to communicate about every single agenda item that we have. So as an example, we have slurry sealing, right? So when we're going to vote on slurry sealing, every single person in that 1/7 of the city, should they get a mailing that we're about to vote on it and pick a contractor? Every single time it hits the agenda, should we be sending something out? I think we're going to find that our communication costs will rise substantially. Maybe that's what we all want. I mean, that's good community dialogue. How do we want to spend those dollars? And that's a good discussion to have. But we need to be looking at it from that approach. I don't think we should be taking one-offs because if we do, again, that's going to come back to haunt us as much as where we're at today. How we communicated on this agenda item is how we've communicated on virtually every agenda item that we've had since 1991 and we were incorporated. So that's the process we've had. If we're going to change it, let's have a robust discussion about it and make that determination. But I would strongly advise that we don't just start picking and choosing how we're going to do that, because that's much, much worse in my mind.
Yeah, I just want to add not just how we normally publicize any item as we do. There's an agenda, people can read it, it's there. We don't send out emails to people that there's an agenda. There's an agenda. You can read it, and whatever. Most of you probably read the agenda, but I did heavy outreach on Veterans Pond Park. In fact, and I don't know if David is still here, but I appeared before the HOA on at least 2 occasions and discussed it at the HOA, who are now coming and saying they didn't know about it. Well, perhaps had you been at your HOA meeting when I brought the issue up, you would have known about it, or in the emails that I sent out, or in the half a dozen articles that I wrote about it. I mean, I really think we did a lot of outreach on this. Now, was it 100? Could it have been better? I agree with you absolutely. And I'm open for a discussion of how we can reach everybody on everything, but I believe that we did communicate with people on this.
So, we have a process in Lake Forest, and before we do major changes to our parks, we should, and in the past always have, had community input meetings, as we had with Village Pond Park and the redesign of what everybody thought they were getting out of Village Pond Park in the conceptual plan and detail of that plan. When we have our sports park, we had, I think, 3 years of input for the sports park to be developed and input from the community. When we had Whispering Hills, we've had community input for everything that we do in major changes. And I think that we didn't go about, and thank you, Mr. Councilman Gardner, for your output, but the fact is the city as itself didn't fall through and be consistent in what they do and be consistent. And we talk about consistency. We weren't consistent in the agenda item to put a Boys and Girls Club in the only park in that older part of the section of the city. The old El Toro part of the city is El Toro Park. We didn't have a public input meeting on that. We didn't have a design, whether the residents support it. We usually notify in years past. We've had to increase the amount of footage, how many feet out we went and notified neighbors when we had major changes. And so I think that's something that we'll have to revisit after at the end of this council meeting. So thank you all for being here. Councilman Helm.
So just one more thing. I just wanted to publicly state that Councilman Robinson I really value his comments, and I think he adds so much to this council, and I wanted to publicly thank him for bringing up what you just mentioned. Briefly, too, I think there might have been some miscommunication. A previous speaker said the city hasn't benefited from any development. Don't we publish a quarterly? What's the last figure, just ballpark, of public benefit, i.e., our sports park? We've built Alton Parkway. We've got Lifton funds. We've got a civic center coming. That's how much? Just kind of ballpark.
Ballpark probably brought in over $120 million in impact fees.
Sorry.
Various impact fees.
Did you just say $120 million? Yes. Okay, so that's a lot different than nothing. So, and then briefly, we do have these Lifton funds. We've asked for a study to try to spend those. I would like for us to go faster, and hopefully our new employee, I was going to mention during the time that I wanted to see you maybe put some overtime in. I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but we do have that project on Bake and the left turn cutting down on one lane to be able to give a right turn to Trabuco. There are some projects, but I hear what you're saying, Mr. Holtzclaw. I feel like I want to hit the gas on relieving traffic.
Are there any further public comments?
No further requests.
Well, thank you all for coming and reminding and encouraging us to be consistent. So with that brings us to the Warrant Registry. All matters listed in the Warrant Registry are considered routine and will be acted by one vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the Warrant Registry for separate action. Have there been any requests from the public?
No, Your Honor.
Councilman, I'll receive.
There's a line item for Serrano Park under Neves Landscape that I'm going to recuse myself on.
Okay.
But other than that, I'll move the rest of the warrant register.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please cast your votes.
That motion passes unanimously.
That brings us to consent calendar. Items number 6 through 8. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be acted by one vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Have there been any requests from the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman, receive motion.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Please cast your votes.
That motion passes unanimously.
That brings us to the public hearing.
Before you, I know we have a policy about potentially reshuffling agenda items, so I know I've heard from staff that we have at least 3 members of the public that wanted to speak on agenda item 11. So I was just wondering, do we have any speakers for agenda item 9?
I've received no request to speak for agenda item 11. I have 3 requests to speak on agenda item 9.
Okay, we'll stay in order. And so 3 have to, so I will open public hearing.
Agenda item 9, public hearing number 4, transition to district-based elections, submitted by City Clerk. Mayor and Council, as you know, this process began in the early summer with the adoption of a resolution of intention where the Council determined that they would complete the transition to district-based elections prior to December 31st, 2017. The legislation governing district-based elections requires multiple public hearings, 2 to be held prior to the submission of maps, 2 to be held after the submission of maps. Tonight is the 4th public hearing. It's the 2nd one after the draft maps were published. At the 3rd hearing on October 3rd, the Council reviewed 26 maps, narrowed it down to 4 focus maps, plus directed the preparation of a 5th map for consideration. At tonight's public hearing, the goal of tonight is at the end is to hopefully select a map and determine the sequencing of the district-based elections, and then on December 5th to conduct a public hearing introducing the ordinance adopting officially the proposed maps. We have, in addition to the public speakers, we have with us Dr. Justin Levitt, who from National Demographics Corporation, to walk us through the process.
Other than that, we look forward to taking your comments, into making any answering any questions here tonight. So thank you very much, and we look forward to a productive discussion.
Any from the public?
Ben Field, followed by Mike Ross.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, thank you for speaking. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to preface this comment by expressing my appreciation for the work that you do to better the city of Lake Forest. Anyone who devotes the time and resources to improving the community is honorable in my book, so thank you very much. I'm here tonight to just briefly discuss the transition to district-based elections and the drawing of district boundaries. More specifically, I'm here to advocate for the adoption of Map 116, which I believe is best for just a few reasons. First of all, if you look at the outline of Map 116, the lines are best suited to group neighborhoods together, which I believe is very important. By considering the placement of neighborhoods in the map, it allows for similar residential areas to have a communal voice when choosing their representatives. Furthermore, each district would have a population, if you do the average, of roughly 15,453 people. This type of proportional split makes sure that a similar amount of people vote in the district elections. And on top of that, the lines are drawn along major thoroughfares and appear to kind of adequately split up the districts. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Mike Ross, followed by Joe Channon.
Good evening. My name is Mike Ross. I'm a 24-year resident of this fine city, and I really like Lake Forest, so you guys don't get enough credit. This is an awesome city. Now, I just saw 129 up there for the first time, and in a textbook, that would be gerrymandering. That's a ridiculous drawing, in my opinion. But I am in here to speak in favor of 116. I think it best represents the city of Lake Forest and gives all of our citizens that have mutual interests the best representation from their city council members. Whenever we have an issue, we would be able to go to that council person to best address our issues and concerns. And I think it, and again, I know we're all, or some of us are emotional about this, but we're going to be redistricting in 2020. So hopefully it gives us a chance and we'll be able to make some corrections. Obviously the population of Baker Ranch will be brought in, and then we can make some adjustments. But so certainly I hope you consider that. And just two other, am I supposed to speak on multiple topics?
What would you like to say on the item? So if you stay on this item.
Okay, that's it. Other than that, but just thank you for your service. I hope you vote for 116 because I think it's the best option for our agenda on the table.
Thank you for your input.
Joe Channon.
Just to correct you on the extra people from Baker Ranch won't actually come in until 2022. That's based on the 2020 census. So in 2020, there's a census, so that won't impact our districting until 2022.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Channon. I'm a 12-year resident of Lake Forest. My in-laws moved here about 8 years ago. Moved from Irvine, California, and love it up here. It's been great. I really, like Mr. Ross said, I feel you guys are maybe a little bit underappreciated in what you guys have done for us up here. The one thing that I haven't had is someone I could go to where I felt that, I can go to a single person and really say, hey, this is my feeling, this is what I think we should be doing. And based on the maps that we have seen that are available, 116 is the one I feel most represents, I think, the overall city and where we're going. I live up in the hills area here. My in-laws live a little further down, and we fall into different areas and different places, but I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And once again, I think Mr. Field spoke earlier and kind of gave you guys all the numbers and everything. I don't think I need to do that again, but I really feel that 116 is really a good way to go, and it really best represents the overall city and where we should be heading. And once again, appreciate everyone's service, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
We've had no further requests.
All right. Well, then we might bring you back for city comments.
So in looking at all the maps, I think that we've got a lot of great options here. I think that some of them probably need to be tweaked a little bit, but not by much. I would say that there's a lot of great options in front of us. I'll start with the new one. I think it's 129. Is that the right number? I get that right.
So it's 128.
128, sorry. So 128. It looks very strange. I'll give everyone that. And I think that it's strange by design. Usually gerrymandering of a district is to carve it out in a particular way for a particular individual or a particular group of individuals. I think that the goal that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me like the goal that Councilman Hamilton is trying to accomplish here is that there are no communities of interest. And the thought behind that is that each one of us, we're forced into this district situation, so each one of us, in not having a real community of interest, would almost be forced to represent the entire city and not represent an individual district. So it's as strange as it kind of looks. I see the overall concept, and I think it's very intriguing. I could support it, but I could support a number of these. I really don't have much of a problem with it. A lot of the comments were directed toward, well, I think all the comments were directed towards 116, and I know that one of my colleagues, has some issues with balance and compactness and those sorts of things. I'm not sure if this really addresses it, but the one thing that really jumps out at me is there's a portion, I forget the name of the track, so forgive me for that, but it's the portion in between Trabuco and Santiago Catholic Church. And it's actually a part of Lake 2. But in this particular 116 map, it goes into the Pittsford, Montbury, so on and so forth. I think that if we were to switch that particular track around a little bit, that we could balance out to one that has some overage in population, one that has some under. Those are some of the tweaks that I would like to see. I think that neighborhood, it makes more sense for it to stay with Lake 2, even though there's this natural Trabuco Road boundary. So, once we can all hopefully find a little consensus around a map or two that we're interested in, I would like to try to see what options we have with staff and with our consultant here to provide us a variety of options of how we might be able to tweak these a little bit here and there to resolve some of those, again, population balances and compactness and things like that, because I think those are valid concerns as well. So those are my initial comments here.
We have a former mayor who might live in that tract. What's the name of that tract?
So I like number 116 also. The thing that bothers me in 116 while we have the map up, I don't like that little finger that comes along the creek there. It seems like we're talking about the long narrow strips on some of the maps, but then we put that map in there. So that long narrow strip bothers me in that when we're unifying the city into quadrants, that looks out of place there. So if that could be switched out of that purple into green and then something traded for one of the other colors. I think that Councilman Robinson said something around there's a cemetery, and that's actually Son of Sail Club. That's the Son of Sail Club property. So that along with District 4, which is mostly the Beach and Tennis Club, are both consistent with that, and there's some crossover of both of those in both districts. But that one finger troubles me a little bit. So 116 is probably my two favorite guys. And so, but I see the conceptual plan on 128. Even though they look long, narrow fingers coming out of the foothills, I understand the conceptual plan to try to keep the city council from being isolated and just representing one part of the city. I think there's something to be said about when a community or an area is being supported wholeheartedly because you have one council member that only supports that area, when we have to look at the city as a whole. I like the conceptual plan. I don't know, but those are my two favorites. I know that 119, according to your studies, 109, 110. There's things I like about all of them, but my favorite is 116 if that finger can be put out of that. It just bothers me that we have no other fingers in that map. So, Councilman Gardner.
Okay, I think there are two major things we need to keep in mind. The first is not to blow a gut here. We're basically doing this for one election, the 2018. People will have the vote probably, and so there'll be something different in 2020, and regardless of that, there's something different in 2022. So we're not, whatever we're doing tonight, we're not locked in forever. It's only one election. So as important as it may be, it's only going to be with us once. That leads me to my second point, which is I think the one thing we can do here, rather than identify any particular district, is to identify a process that we'll need to use again and again and again. And coming up with a process that makes sense is more important than what we particularly pick as the one to go with. So let me talk about that process. As I have done hundreds of times about dozens of different issues, I'm really always looking at what does the data show us. If it's the police, I want to know, what are the crime to, what are the response time, what are the KPIs, what are the numbers. Numbers aren't all you have, but at least they're a place to start. So what I've done with the paper you have in front of you, that's me using what the demographers have told us and looking at the numbers. In two cases, they're actually numbers that we can manipulate. They're real numbers. And we can look at them. In the third case, they're kind of ordinal. They're not exactly numbers, but they're ordinal. And the three things we've been told to look at, which I think this time, the next time, and the next time we need to look at them, is first of all, one person, one vote. We need to be coming up with a district that best matches one person, one vote, that has the least deviations of any district, because that's what enshrines the guarantee to people that my vote is worth the same thing as your vote, the same thing as your vote. Now, the demographers have said, well, you could deviate by 10% or 1,500, and anything within 1,500 is fair game. Well, that may be true, but we have some real numbers here. And the real numbers say that map 109 has only 110 deviations. The map that some people said they liked here has got 1,082 deviations. It's got 10 times the difference between 109. So, and that's the thing we're told to look at most importantly. In the list you have in front of you, you can see 109 and 110 are by far the two maps that keep us to the federal mandate of one person, one vote. Does that mean we're going to be sued if we pick 115, which is 1302? No, it doesn't mean we're going to be sued, but I think we should be doing what's right, and what's right is, to the extent that it's possible, go with one person, one vote. And that, to me, suggests 109, 1010. The other thing we're told about is compactness. Compactness is basically, does it, stick together? Is it everybody around everybody else? The measure that the demographers use of a compactness score pretty much tells us whether or not the way we've drawn, or the way they've drawn the districts, are like a circle, compact, or not. In those two comparisons, and you have it in front of you, 109 and 110 again come out the top, with a number 116 tied for second. So there seems to be a little consistency there, and I don't think the demographers can explain that either.
I actually would like to intercede. Justin, are all these maps acceptable to the legal standard of what districting would stand for?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, I didn't say we're going to be sued if we don't. Finally, we get to the area of communities of interest, something else we've been told we need to look at. In terms of communities of interest, I conducted 3 polls on the internet, and I conducted 1 poll in person, And in each case, I asked the people involved, and I talked to the Foothill residents, the Portola residents, the Lake 1, Lake 2 residences, and then in person, I spoke to the Lake 1 residences. So I had 4 community outreach. It probably came to less than 200 people altogether. But in all the cases, by a margin of either 2 to 1 or 4 to 1, people preferred that the communities of interest be kept together. There is another argument that says it's nice to split it because then you have 2 people working for you. That's the other side of the argument. And I don't disagree with that. But at least in the surveys I conducted, there was an overwhelming desire by the people to keep their communities together. So the third map you have, the third chart you have for you is the mapping of the communities of interest. And there we're looking at, in green, you see the extent to which a community is kept together 100%. In yellow, you see the degree to which a community is kept together within 75%, and the white are below 75%. And if you look at that data, you can see, once again, 109 comes out on top, 110 comes out next, 115 comes out next, 128 comes out next, and then 116 comes out last. So on all 3 measures, there's a consistency between 109 and 110 as being keeping to the one person, one vote mandate, being the most compact, and keeping together the communities of interest. Now, it doesn't matter to me, personally, what races are in these groups, what city council people are in these groups, whether or not it creates a new group or an old group, et cetera, et cetera. Those aren't really quantifiable, but they're not what we're told we should look at. So from my point of view, in 109, 110 don't differ all that much. I could live with either one of them. But it seems to me, looking at the data, that those are the 2 maps that most conform to what we're being asked to do.
Councilman Hamilton.
I, too, am a numbers person. And in a lot of regards, you know, there's a lot of times that you and I agree on a lot of things. But your use of statistics here kind of reminds me of a movie I enjoy watching called Dead Poets Society. And there's a famous scene. You haven't seen it? Oh, gosh. Where Robin Williams asks the students, you know, let's read from the textbook. The textbook name is Understanding Poetry by Dr. J. Evans Pritchard. To fully understand poetry, we must first be fluent with its meter, rhyme, and figures of speech. Then we ask 2 questions. 1, how artfully has the objective of the poem been rendered? And 2, how important is that objective? Question 1 rates the poem's perfection. Question 2 rates its importance. Once these 2 questions have been answered, determining a poem's greatness becomes a relatively simple matter. If a poem's score for perfection is plotted along the horizontal of the graph, and its important is plotted on the vertical, then calculating the total area of the poem yields the measure of the greatness. And it goes on and on. It really takes out the emotion from poetry. It's like this rote. You have to see the movie.
E. Cummings said one-eyed son of a bitch describing spring. I think it's the same thing. There are some things you shouldn't look at numbers.
So, to me, to tag along in it, and people are fairly well, they're summarizing my comments, and to me, I don't want to have communities of interest, because we really are a community, one community of interest. Some people say united, we stand, divided we fall. I think this whole district elections is really a effort to try to divide us. and I would like to unify us. And so I think doing the minimum that we have to do, we have to have that district down at the bottom. What are we calling that one? Can I use that term that you used?
I think it's just District 5.
District 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
so District 5. But that's the special district that we're required to...
No, we don't have...
There's no requirement.
Okay, well, it seems like in some thoughts that we need some kind of district for some special reasons. Just one toward the bottom of the freeway. Maybe Shankman would be a person that could answer that question better. But the other four districts, I feel we should try to unify the city and not divide the city. And so, using your methodology, although I love statistics and I love, it to me is like trying to plot poetry on an X and Y axis. And so, I really think that map 128, even though it might look like it's gerrymandering, it's the attempt and the effort behind it is to unify our city. And so that's where I'll be heading tonight. And you should watch Dead Poets Society.
Councilman Robinson?
Yeah, Councilman Gardner, I heard your comments and I understand where you're coming from, and that's why I agree some of those factors are important. And I would say if there's a map that it seems like we can coalesce around, that we should try to make sure that our consultant can give us as many different versions of that so we can look at those very things that you were talking about. So the number of deviations, the compactness, balancing out the population as much as possible. If the maps were static, I would agree with what you're saying, but I think that they're still dynamic in the sense that we can move a few streets here and there. We can look at trying to find where there might be some communities of interest that might make sense to carve in. Similar to, just looking at those maps, I think that you could probably carve out that Lake 2 neighborhood and then add in some of the strip that Mayor Voights was talking about into that one that's in the Pittsford-Montbury area, and you'd probably balance out some of that population a little bit. I don't have it all in front of me, but that's just more my assumption that it might balance that out a little bit. I don't know how that would affect the compactness. I'm not really sure, but it's again, if we can coalesce around one or two and then get as many versions as possible, or maybe even look at it in some live sense at a future meeting, that would be my preference, because I'm good with a few of these maps, but not perfectly as is. I still think they need a little bit of tweaking here and there, and I think that's probably a very common thing. I'm familiar with one city, I think Mr. Channing came from there, where they had one map that basically it just kept moving a street, and so there were about 100 different versions of essentially the same map, just moving it around a little bit in the previous city that he'd worked in. So, doing something like that might address some of your comments, maybe some of the mayor's, some of mine, and again, I totally understand where Councilman Hamilton's going, trying to unify the city by essentially having there's no unity in the districts, meaning it forces unity, in the city. I just don't know that there's enough support there. So, but I'm still open.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thanks. First of all, as far as the concept of not being communities of interest, that I greatly disagree, because, as an example, I live in Portola Hills, and we were ignored for a while. And when Saddleback Ranch Road happened, a lot of people up there were very, very upset, and we still felt pretty ignored. And it was such a vocal outrising in my community that I ended up getting on City Council. So whether or not we agree or disagree that there are communities of interest, I think the people kind of spoke and said there were. And additionally, if we're looking at Portola Hills or Foothill Ranch, they don't have a lot in common with other parts of the city. So I understand the concept of trying to spread and have someone represent from, all the way east, all the way west, but maybe the representative would be able to take care of their constituents. However, the constituents within those areas don't have a lot in common. So we have to look at the perspective from the resident. People that live in the mobile home parks do not care about Concourse Park. I mean, Concourse Park is in the middle of the Whiting Ranch. It's a completely different community. So we have to respect that there are real communities of interest out there. And as far as looking at this poetry, I mean, to me, this isn't poetry. This is numbers. These are, poetry can be, has a special interpretation, and it can mean different things to different people. But when you're looking at 80,000 people are 80,000 today, and they're 80,000 tomorrow. So we can't look at it in terms of poetry. We should look at it as real numbers. As far as the maps and the ones that I found interesting, I really liked 115, and the reason why I liked it was because based upon the future census data, I have a great feeling that Foothill Ranch and Portola Hills will be separated because we have such massive growth up in that area. I've got 1,000 houses going right in my backyard. Baker Ranch isn't being developed, so I can see that happening. However, I'm willing to forego and move away from 115 to gain some consensus among the City Council. I think eventually that may end up happening, but I'm okay letting that go, knowing that we will be revisiting this at a later date. Looking at the two maps, then, in my opinion, that make the most sense right now would be either map 110 or 116. I like Jim's perspective of one person, one vote. That makes a lot of sense to me. As far as communities of interest, it appears to me that it's keeps communities together that should be together, and I'm looking at little streets and how they kind of kitty corner, but it looks like the communities are sticking together, and I really like that. But again, I am flexible, and if I can build consensus and we can make a decision on one, I'm willing to go for that. I'll be happy with either 110 or 116.
Justin, so with the comments you've heard, if you could, we have the ability, Council, if we asked for slight changes and variations in some of the maps like Councilman Robinson suggested, could we bring back two versions of each of these maps?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, I could talk you through some of the changes to 116 just here that might address some of your concerns. Is there a population balance that we could swing? I want to explain what we would do in general principles and perhaps make it both more compact and get the population deviation down and address your issue with this finger here. What we could do is take this area north of Trabuco Canyon into Area 3 and then swing District 4 in a little bit further south so that it would go perhaps to the train track or perhaps even to, we'd have to check the populations, but to Muirlands. What we'd end up doing is Area 5 would more or less be the area south of Muirland Boulevard, as it already is on 128 and several of the other maps. And then Area 2 would come in to probably this neighborhood between Kenyatta Road or Canada Road and Lake Forest Drive. We'll have to play around with the population numbers to make sure but that would be the general principle. What that would do is certainly eliminate or significantly reduce the finger that we're all talking about with 116. That would be one of the changes that we could look at, sort of just a rotation of it, to make areas 3 and 4 both more compact without major influences on areas 2 or 3.
So if we had a vote and help me with this, if we had a vote and chose which maps we want you to look at and then bring back so we don't leave all 5 maps on the table here. I could feel good about 110 and vote for that. And I could vote for 128. I hear the theory of what he's trying to bring in trying to allow each council member to represent multi-areas of the city. And then I like 116 with the ability to have the south side, the creek, basically above Tribuco. And there's actually merit in, I like 115. It kind of segments Foothill Ranch and leaves Portola Hills intact and leaves Portola Hills intact as a, because when that talk to many children of the city of Lake Forest, and when I talk to children of Lake Forest and they're from the foothills, many times I'll ask them, so what city do you live in? And they'll tell me Foothill Ranch, or they'll tell me Portola Hills. And it's just a segment that we have that they feel their own sense of community. So I think that 115 has merits on that in allowing those 2 segments to be segmented off to their side. But I could, my favorite are 116, 110, and 128. Council?
Well, so far, I think 3 of us have said we're good with 116. I don't know what the other 2 feel. They haven't necessarily said they're opposed to 116, but I think that it's probably important that we hopefully just get to 1 map, and then again, my comment out here is just give us a bunch of versions of that 1 map so that, or we do it live, so we can play around with it a little bit, try to balance out the population compactness. I'm not really sure what's the best approach there. I would lean on the staff for some advice as to what might be the best way of handling that. But I kind of feel like if there's 3 of us right now that are saying 116 is good, that's probably
I'm not good
that's
with
going to get us there.
As is. I'm okay with 116
Yep.
with a tweak. So I'd make a motion, and we'll still open for discussion, but I'll make a motion that 116 with the tweak of that finger being adjusted out of that so we don't have a finger. I'm not putting up the middle finger, I'm putting a finger. I'd make a motion that we come back with that 116.
Yeah, so I guess I'm confused. 116 has the worst deviations. It's in the bottom 3 on compactness. And, if we are not going to try to unify the city, then I'm going to stand up for Lake 2, and it's almost the worst one for keeping all Lake 2 intact. So, I mean, what if we really, really want to go with the Pritchard score, the Gardner score, then I'm going to fight for Lake 2 to keep us all together. And, we can't just kind of say we want to do that and then not really do it. So, what is it? Are we gonna fight for our turf? Then I say Lake 2 needs to be 100% as a community of interest. But I'm willing to compromise and try to unify the city.
Councilman Hamilton, I think that in 116, with the change of population from that finger that we're talking about, that number 2, District 2 could gain a lot of the rest of Sun and Sail Club, Lake 2. I think that could happen. I think that's what he suggested happening. I think at the corner of Tribuco and Lake Forest, around the cemetery, is Lake 2. I think the woods along the freeway, and
I'm gonna let
and I don't think there's any way that you're going to completely put a homeowners association in one district, and so.
Well, that's kind of the criteria that it seems like.
Well, not
around.
Not according to Councilman Robinson and me. Yeah, I'm thinking just the most common sense, because I'm looking at major streets, and as the three gentlemen that spoke to us tonight, the unification and not going down the middle of the streets, 116 is the cleanest of all the maps, and not breaking up neighborhoods by down the middle of someone's street.
116 is the worst of all the maps, and this is again why I said in the beginning is the most important thing we can do tonight is to come up with a process. I mean, and that's what I tried to do with my poetry, to rely on the numbers if we're going to go with numbers. And 116 is the worst of the maps.
So you want to make a motion for what map you like, and we'll vote. Can we vote for 3 maps out of this meeting?
Mr. Mayor, Council, that's council's prerogative. The one driving factor in terms of the CVRA and our timelines is we've committed and granted it's kind of a Pyrrhic commitment to have everything done by the new year, which would require us to have first reading of the ordinance on December 5th. So at some point we have to come back with the official map, and that'll have to be ideally by December 5th. But we have some meetings in front of us. We have enough time to draw some deviations of these maps and then post them, and then 7 days after that, at the next council meeting, we can come back and rehash it.
Well, yeah, you could task him. I think 116 has 1,082 deviations.
According to you, but according to Justin, it's fine. No, it's according to Justin, they're fine.
Well, excuse me. Would you rather have $110 or $1,082? Let me tell you.
It depends on who's writing the check.
No, they're going to do it cash. What do you want? 110 or 1,082?
I can understand both of you on this, and
well, no, but he can probably, I'm absolutely sure, he can tweak that and get the numbers better.
The only problem is, though, that we know we have an issue with Baker Ranch. So trying to strive to mathematical perfection, we know that we're off because of Baker Ranch.
Yeah.
So to me, again, I just don't.
But we're not off with regard to splitting communities of interest. And, 116 splits Lake 1 and Lake 2 by 69%, splits Creekside almost in half, splits the lakes. I mean, that one's bad. I'm not sure he can do that. But I have no problems with tasking him to do that and seeing if he can do that.
I'm not sure if you're going to fight for Lake 1 having 100% community interest.
I have homes in Lake 1 and Lake 2, and I'm, interested in the whole city.
Okay, you got homes in Lake 1 and Lake 2, and map 110 puts Lake 1 and Lake 2 in the same district. Those are the 2 largest homeowners associations in the city of Lake Forest. I think that if you draw the right map, you can have the majority of both those associations in one district, but the little bit of left over.
In which one?
In 110. Both in 110, Sun and Sail Club and Beach and Tennis Club are both in the same district, District 4. You can pull up
51% is in Lake.
No. Hey, pull up map 4.
Map 110.
I mean, map 110.
Yeah. 51%. What are you talking about?
No, I'm looking at the lake. Ridge Route.
What are you talking about? The whole Village Pond Park, the other side of Ridge Route is all Lake 1.
Yeah, I'm saying, but the Sun and Sail Club is in the same district. That's what I'm saying.
49% of Lake 1
I think you're saying
is on this side. 51, it's almost split in half.
110.
I'm looking at 110. This is all Lake 1. And it's in a different...
The lake's in 4.
You're saying the HOA and he's saying the lake.
What you talking about? I'm talking about the HOA.
Oh, I'm talking about the lake and the surrounding community there, so.
I have no problem tasking him with doing a better job on 116 if we want to go with that.
Then I'll make that motion. Let's have the demographer tweak 116 to make it where there's less deviations and more compactness if it's possible.
And I'll second.
But we should, okay, let's vote on that.
Mr. Mayor, could you also clarify that you'd like that back at the next meeting?
No, before the next meeting. We don't want to get...
We actually want it posted before, so if he can make 2 or 3 variations of this and they're posted, the next meeting we could vote on it. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, Council, it's a 7-day requirement prior to the meeting. If it's posted within 7 days, then yes, you can vote on it finally at the next meeting.
Justin, you got a busy night.
Yes, and we will look at maybe creating a couple of different versions that really look at this. I think the compactness issue, it's driven by that finger in Area 4. Once you move that finger out of Area 4, then the compactness score is going to increase, probably very similar to 110. We will provide those to you as well.
So there's been a motion made and seconded. I'm going to call the vote. Please cast your votes for a variation of 116.
So before we do that, are we saying that we only want 3 or 4? I mean, I really think that we should... I mean, are we going to follow this or not?
No.
Well, I'm hoping that he can solve those problems and, in fact, move some things around and keep some communities intact. So I'm hopeful that he can do that. I wouldn't bet on it, but I'm hopeful. So I'm going to suggest that we come up with a second map that we tweak as well, so we're not stuck if he's unable to do the 160. Don't want to throw all our apples in the same basket.
I think that this is a tall task, trying to keep the communities of interest together. I think the one person, one vote is probably going to be the easiest, because all you could do is just move, the borders. I think if you're going to do that, I think I would say, is it 116 that we were on?
Yeah.
I would say let's include 128 and 116 and get like 10 variations of each.
No, 10 variations of each.
I mean, that's what...
In order to really do multiple versions, we need to have some idea from council as to what's not working or what needs to be changed. Right now I'm hearing several specific things that I think we can do in 1 or 2 variations of 116. But if we're just doing maps to make maps, then it doesn't add much to the conversation. So if I hear specific comments or get specific direction on what each map would look like, that's what we would really need at this point.
No, I was trying to channel my inner Councilman Robinson there with the multiple versions of maps.
Well, I think the whole point was just more of how can you get closer and closer to this one person, one vote with the most limited number of deviations, and then also keep certain communities of interest in play. That's the challenge there, because as you move one street over, you might start losing on one end, right? So it's... If you're trying to get, I mean, it really comes down to what that ultimate goal is. Is it trying to get the deviation down as close to nothing as possible? Or is it compactness? And then how does that affect communities of interest? I mean, I think we all would say there'd be certain people on certain streets that if these 3 streets moved out, but the number of deviations dropped significantly, that deviation number dropped significantly, the people in those 3 streets would be frustrated because they weren't in this community of interest. So that's kind of the balance. I mean, to me, that's what it is. It's a balance between all of it. There is no one overarching number that this one needs to be perfect. Because by making it perfect,
yeah,
another imperfection pops up, right? So, and I don't know how to really address that without doing it live. I could give you all my comments, but I can't guarantee you that my 4 colleagues would agree with my comments if I sat down with you tomorrow morning and did this, right? So, and that's kind of the challenge. I mean, if we were doing it live, yeah, you know, we could do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, even if we did it live, we would still have to wait 7 days before any council member discussed on or voted on it.
So I'll make a, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I guess I'd go to the city attorney and say, you know, could we take straw votes and things like that so that, you know, we come up with something, but we're not voting to approve it.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that's the reason why we'd be having this meeting in the middle, basically, right?
The meeting in the middle could certainly include straw votes, include live mapping. The important thing would be to have maps or a map noticed 7 days prior to the December 5th meeting.
And so, you know, I'm good with 116. If you wanted to add the 128, I mean, I'm okay with that.
Is that a substitute motion?
It's not. I'm not making a substitute motion. I seconded the original motion, and,
We can
and I'm
vote on
sticking
that,
to
then
that. But
do more motions.
But you know, so it's 116. I think now has 4 that have said they're okay with it, but want to see it tweaked. So that's what we're asking the consultant to do, and you know, what it takes to get this all done. I mean, you know, but there's a motion on the table. So.
Okay.
I'll make a substitute motion that incorporates the previous motion about 116, and I'm open to the number of versions that we'd want along the lines of Councilman Robinson. If you think it's 5 or 10, and you know, according to the scaling. In addition, I'd like to see map 128 and the unity option with maybe a 129, 2 others, 3 others. I'll let staff decide. So that's my substitute motion.
Justin, you need more clarification than that?
Yes. Because I need to know when I draw on the maps, because if we're just drawing map after map after map that look almost identical, then we need to know what it is, so when we're coming back to you with new maps, we're just saying, we moved this 1 block over, we moved these 2 blocks over. Are those productive parts of the conversation? Or, I mean, is it better to just, you know, talk about, like, well, this is the map that we thought best made the trade-offs between these? I mean, I just feel like...
Yeah, I'll clarify my motion, and I personally think the compactness really, I mean, if we're really going for communities of interest and one person for one vote, I don't understand the value. I think it's just too many competing things. So I'll say with a priority toward communities of interest first. Do we agree on the mobile homes, the different classifications? Lake 1, Lake 2?
Well, let me, because I'm the one who wrote this poem. Those.
No, it wasn't a poem. You were doing the technical, the calculated approach.
These were communities of interest that were impacted by the maps. There are probably 30 or 40 communities of interest in the city, but they weren't impacted by the maps. So all I did here was to identify communities of interest that might be impacted. For example, Serrano. That wasn't split by anybody, so it's not in here. So this is not an exhaustive list of the communities of interest in the city. It's simply a list of the community of interests that were going to be split or not by the 5 maps we were playing with.
So you're saying there's about 30 communities of interest?
Probably more.
Okay, well, with the communities of interest that Gardner will provide within 24 hours,
I mean, so...
unless staff has any, do you have any input on community? Do you have a list of communities of interest? All right.
So
my motion still is as is with this additional, we'll do these 50 communities of interest, or whatever the list is our first priority. and then the one person, one vote is the second priority. Trying to balance those items, and the highest winner, to me, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, right?
We've been told over and over again by almost everybody who says anything that one person, one vote is the main issue. I don't know how you want to put it second when everybody tells us it needs to be first.
But if it's in the allowable, to me, it's like the margin of error.
Oh.
We've been told the margin of error is acceptable, and as long as the map is within the margin of error, and I wouldn't even mind saying then we give a little bit more weighting to, we can overweight toward the district that has Baker Ranch, or underweight. No, it would be...
It's very hard to do.
Yeah, giving preference to the Baker Ranch. I mean, like, if we're going to
Councilman Hamilton,
create this, then...
Councilman Hamilton, I'll help you with your motion, a substitute motion. I think there was a map that he was not submitted, that he helped draft.
Yeah, it's a version of 128.
I will help him, if you allow me, bring back 128 and the map that was, that we haven't seen, 129, and then 128, if you can try to put points of interest where you have the Sun and Sail Club and the Beach and Tennis Club down off of Muirlands and Ridge Route, put all in either the 5th or the 2nd, or however, to kind of unify that beach and tennis one, and then bring that back to us. Could you do that? That's bringing back one map that wasn't put on, that was his vision. The 128, because the Sun and Sail Club is mostly intact in District 1, but in District 2, you have the lake, but not much of the lake association in there. You have mostly the lake association in number 5. So down there, where that little nook is right there, that's the lake area. So if that can be swung around a little bit, and just bring that, okay.
We can certainly do that.
Okay, that's all we ask. I know that's a tall order, but...
and the reason why I'm making this motion is just, I mean, if we're going to go this route,
right,
where
there's a motion on
then
the
let's
table.
do it. I mean, let's
do I get a
do
second on my substitute
communities
motion?
of interest and the one person, one vote.
Okay. The substitute motion?
Mr. Mayor, we need clarification on the actual substitute motion. It's my understanding that...
129 added.
It's my understanding that the original motion by Mayor Pro Tem Basil is to have the developer tweak map 116 for less deviation and more compactness, and you would like to see 3 or 4 variations of 116.
Without the finger.
Correct. You gave him specific directions on how to tweak it, but yes. And that was seconded by Councilmember Robinson, and then you submitted a substitute motion to keep that, well, Councilmember Hamilton did, to keep the original motion intact, and then to add map 128 and 129?
Yes.
And then what are we doing to map 128 and 129?
You'll have to talk to him about that.
So then I'm fine with the motion it is.
I think then we need to like have a robust discussion of the communities of interest.
I'll second his substitute motion and call the vote.
We need to put priorities.
I need to know what the motion is.
128 and 129.
Just the way they are.
Yeah.
What you read with his, 128, 129 comments, and I'm adding that, we need to go robust with the communities of interest as the primary, and the secondary is the one person, one vote.
Okay. The motion is the 128, 29.
And I'd ask the Democrat, do you believe you have enough direction on 128 and 129 to bring back maps that would be...
I have heard one revision of what is 129, what should have been posted as 129 already, that would deal with the Sun and Sail Club and the Beach and Tennis Club.
128.
Or starting with 128. Okay.
I'd like to separate my motion. I'd like it to be original motion with being 116 for deviation compactness, and have it ready for the next meeting. Let's make that one motion, and then let's separate the additional
We'll take
motion.
the substitute motion first, then.
Can you reiterate the substitute?
Okay,
I don't know what it is.
Okay, so the substitute motion on the table has that been seconded? Councilman Robinson?
I think Mayor Pro Tem Basil's asked for clarification on the substitute motion, so if we could get clarification one more time.
The substitute motion is to have the demographer tweak map 116 for less deviation and more compactness, have it return on 1121, 3 or 4 variations of that, plus map 128 to include the Sun and Sail Club and Beach and Tennis Club in the same district.
Separate the two.
Separate the two.
I thought you said together.
No.
Separate the Sun and Sail Club and the Beach and Tennis Club, and then to also present map 129 as it was drawn but not published.
That's correct.
And for
no,
116, no, I'm the maker of the motion. And 116 has the first priority as community of interest, and the second, one person, one vote.
I'm calling the vote. Thank you. All in favor?
That motion passes with Voights, Hamilton, and Robinson in favor.
We're accepting something we haven't even seen.
We're just calling it back.
It was never forward for it to come back.
Yeah, and the point is we started tonight, we started with 5 maps, and now we're going to come back the next meeting with probably 10 maps.
5.
Just
I hear what you're saying. We're going to come back with a variety of maps of 116, 128, 129 versions of that are kind of still staying in. So I kind of view it as there's different versions of 116 and there's different versions of 128. I do feel like we've narrowed it down. We're just looking at more versions of those two, but we've narrowed it down. That's what I hope that we've done. At this point, I'm still leaning toward 116, but I'm okay with not excluding this concept of not dividing up the city. And, I'm really struggling with it. I'm not really sure where I stand. I'm just going to be straightforward, because once we start creating districts, I think people a lot of them are going to want a community of interest. Even if they don't right now, once the district gets created, it's going to do everything that we don't want, which is balkanize the city. But once it's already happened, then people are going to want to cluster. So even though they don't want it now, once they have no choice but to have it, they're going to want to have one unified vote. So, but I'm still willing to have the discussion. It's just, I'm not really sure that it's going to win out. So,
And I think we're going to have street maintenance. There's going to be all sorts of issues, park maintenance, that we're going to be fighting for traffic, all these things. United we stand.
Discussion items, item number 10.
Agenda item 10, Civic Center project update submitted by Assistant City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, tonight we will have a presentation from Assistant City Manager Keith Neves. He'll present actually on items 10A as well as 10B.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight I will briefly update the City Council on the progress of the Civic Center project with a short PowerPoint presentation. Back in May, about 6 months ago, we started off with the groundbreaking. Today, October, November, we are finishing. The rough grade is complete, and if you've gone out to the site or looked at the end of Indian Ocean, the start of construction of the parking deck has started. and we'll show you some PowerPoint slides moving forward. Going forward in December and January, we will start the bidding process on the multi-prime contracting for the actual Civic Center site buildings themselves. And then we will present Civic Center site construction contracts to the City Council at that time. Just a reminder, we'll have probably 25 to 30 multi-prime contracts coming to you in the next 90 days. And then, of course, in the summer of 2019, we will see the Civic Center ground opening. Just a few photos. Here was back in May at the groundbreaking of the Civic Center. This was the start of grading in June of 2017. I just want to show you a few of these PowerPoints because you're really going to see how the site developed, and at the end of the PowerPoint where the site is today. Along the way, we had a few slowdowns from our little creatures, the gnatcatcher and the horn lark, the birds that were on site that slowed the project down. And I think it was about a 45 to 60 day delay on the project because of some of these birds, but we're through all that, and as you can see on some future PowerPoint slides, the site is well into shape now. Here's the MSE wall that is completed and built by the mitigation area. And then a few of the bones that were found on site. Some whale bones, shark teeth, other fossils that also slowed down the project a little bit because they kept digging them up. Here's our Army Corps of Engineers mitigation site. This is the splitter box that, before the project even started, it took us almost 2 years to get through the Army Corps of Engineers permit, and this is what that is all about. You're standing on top of the MSE wall looking down. That's what you're going to you see when you're standing outside the community center and the administrative building looking out and over.
That road is the road to that little park?
The
right?
nature park that the developer will. Yes.
Yeah.
And the trail, the county trail. And here's the graded pad as of this month. They've certified the pad. Let me look at my Public Works Director. And yes, we have completely certified the pad on both the ARB site and the Civic Center site. And here's kind of a before photo back May 2017 of the site looking out over Indian Ocean or Civic Center Drive. And then today when you look out over Civic Center Drive, right at the end of the fence right now. And then, as you can see, we will start street construction. Here's looking at the end of Civic Center Drive right now. And that's one of the contracts that staff will be recommending that you approve tonight is the street construction, storm drain, and utilities. And here's the ARB site for the parking deck structure. As you see, they're fenced off. There's, in the background, you can see a little bit the beams. They've already brought in beams, and you will start seeing a parking deck structure go up within the next 30 to 60 days. So, tonight, the next steps is the staff is recommending that the City Council approve the street improvement, storm drain, and utilities construction contract. And maybe we can do this one at a time, and then we can go to the owner's representative contract.
Do you want me motions from us?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there any questions public? There's none from the public? So, my understanding was that the owner's rep...
Well, let's go for the street construction, utilities, storm drain contract first, and then we'll talk about the owner's...
I thought they were going to review the
Then we'll talk about
contract.
the owner's representative contract.
I thought they were going to review the contracts first, i.e. these items that we're voting first. The owner's rep was going to look at the contracts, all the construction contracts before they're issued. And I don't understand why we would be approving the contracts and then going, don't we want the owner's rep on board first? to then review the contracts, and then we would approve the contracts?
Good evening. Say good morning. Good evening. Certainly, it's council prerogative how you want to do it. The owner's rep really was designed to come on board for this Civic Center building itself. It's much more complex. This is a low bid situation, so there's really not that much to review in terms of the contract for a low bid. This is pretty typical for what the city does in terms of a street utility contract. So our recommendation is move forward, just like we didn't have an owner's rep on board to review the rough grading project, which has gone fine. So that would be our recommendation, is to move forward with the street and get the utilities done. I'd like to remind also council that this is fully reimbursable by IRWD, so it's not city funding. This is the developer-funded project, so there's really zero risk to the city in this particular contract. It'd be the other contracts that we really want to put the owner's representative to work on.
So I will clarify. So we're going low bid on these, and these are reimbursable because the grading and property prepared is coming from IRWD. So
yes, both the grading and the street construction is 100% reimbursable.
Yeah,
it's just a self-help.
And we're going with low bid on that.
And both of them are low.
So this is all flat work construction on the streets and curbs. So I'll stick with my motion to move approval, and then we'll move on to owner's rep.
Well, let me ask you, would you see any benefit to the owner's rep looking at those?
No, because they're going with low bid in the first place, and it's all flat work.
But the specs of them, that's where I'm...
It's low bid, and it's flat work. It's easy.
So, okay.
It's like a patio deck.
All right.
Okay.
But just to clarify, so it's public works project, so we're required to go with the lowest responsive bidder, right? Okay. So where I think you might see some concerns would be if this particular contract had some change orders associated with it, right? And those are going to come in down the line. So the fact that we're voting on both of these tonight, I see as being a positive. If this owner's rep is going to see any problem in this, it's going to come in the form of a change order. It's not going to be the contract itself. It's not going to be the specs. It's going to be something where they said, this was outside of what we said we were going to do, and they say, no, that was included. The owner's rep can help us a little bit with that. Not to say that they will, but that's what they'll be there for. So I see benefit in voting for both of them tonight. And I wouldn't want to hold this particular contract up so that they could get on board and review it, and then we might approve it 2 or 3 meetings from now, and we would just delay the project is what would end up happening.
So there's motion on the table.
Okay, just want to say I agree with Councilman Hamilton. It's a little distressing to me to know that we're going to vote $350,000 or more for an owner rep, and the first thing we're told, the first time it comes up, is that there's no benefit to having the owner rep on this. So
well, the fact is, as we get into the construction of the buildings,
I understand,
and the parking structure,
it's just a very grim forebodings.
Well, so if there is a change order, I think the value of having the owner rep there first, that they would see, hey, there might be a need for a change order down the road. Let's change the scope. But I mean, I don't want to slow down the process, so I'm stuck.
I'll second the mayor's motion.
And I'll say again that this is just the preparation of getting the road and drainage in so that we can build the buildings. So in fact, there's not a lot that we could change on this. So I'm seeing that this is a safe thing, and I'm thankful. Maybe we're a little bit behind the 8 ball because I think that the owner reps should have been maybe brought on earlier. But I'm glad that they're coming on board now before the construction of the buildings. So there's a motion made and seconded.
Can I just ask one more question? So you're absolutely sure that we're not going to, I mean, are there going to be any, you don't see any change orders right now, but I mean, we've got a drain on Serrano that plugs, is everything to the right size? And, reassure me that we're not going to get a change order.
I cannot do that. There's no way I can. Well, what I would say again is the owner's rep is great at mitigating our risk. There's no risk to the city with this contract. All the risk is with IRWD. If there is a change order, it's all with IRWD. So the only risk is delaying our schedule.
All right, then I'm going to support it based on change order.
All in favor, cast your votes.
IRWD's going to. Sorry.
That motion passes unanimously.
Now.
All right, the second part of the motion will be staff is recommending Red Brick Consulting to provide owner's representative services for the remainder of the Civic Center project. Their experience on similar projects, their personnel, and their qualifications and the cost. Staff who sit on the panel is recommending that the City Council approve this contract. A couple of reminders: the contract is time and material, so if we do not need it all, we do not have to spend it all. We will use them as we need them. It's just not a contract that they can start at day one and they're going to collect their $375 at the very end. It's all time and material. It's going to help the city reduce risk during this. We have it's going to be almost a $58 million multi-prime contracts, 25 to 30 contracts going at once. It's just a second set of eyes for us to look at. And then they can look forward to any issues during this construction, and foresee things that they've seen on other projects. They've been owners' reps for many, many projects. They're sitting in the audience tonight. If you have questions, we can bring them up and they can answer all those questions for you. So I'll turn it back over to the City Council with any questions. And Red Brick is in the audience that can come up and answer any of those.
First of all, I want to state that I'm excited about having an extra set of eyes and people are experienced in reviewing and watching over construction, because as we've seen in other municipalities in Orange County, how things have escalated and gotten way out of control. And so if you guys would like to come up, maybe we could open up for some questions from the council.
Good evening. I'm Greg Powers. I'm one of the principals at Red Brick Consulting. I run our consulting group, and I'm the principal in charge for this project. I'm the one that was asked. I presented my credentials to work on this project.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
And I do have to say I appreciate the second set of eyes, too. There's just so many moving parts. It's always good to have, someone looking over everything, make sure everything's on schedule, and so I think this is great. But a couple of questions for you.
Absolutely.
What types of issues do you tend to see with these big multi-contract projects?
One of the biggest challenges, so Bernard's is your construction manager, and they're tasked with a lot of different duties. One, from building out, working on the design, ensuring that the design is properly prepared, also making sure that they're working with the contractors to make sure there's no scope gaps in what they do. One of the things that we do in our advisory services is we see a lot of different things. We work on many different projects. But we probably have 7 or 8 different parking structures going on right now that we're involved in, and we see things in other projects that we can catch early and we can bring them ahead. One of the key ingredients that we try and bring to the table is, I always say, we're trying to look over the horizon. With our experience and the amount of years I've been doing this, I'm always trying to get ahead of the curve to figure out, okay, do we have a problem downstream that's going to bite us? If we end up in the Performing Arts Center with a special finish that is 16 weeks or 17 weeks or 30 weeks out, I'm going to be the guy standing on the table saying, you got to order this, you got to make this decision. I can do those things because my view is a little different, and I don't have some of the constraints that the construction manager has. Again, our job is, not to do their work. They're tasked to do their work. You guys, you're paying them a lot of money, you've hired them to do that, and it's more of an advisory and guidance and support, and just being, again, that extra set of eyes is one thing, but we're also very comfortable with telling you that there's something that's not right. We're very comfortable with telling you guys, hey, this is where you need to go with this. An example is if we had a situation like on this low bid issue, I'm going to be sitting back saying it's a spec that's low bid. It was put out there to the public. It's been bid. It's forward. Will there be change orders? Maybe, but we're going to try and get ahead of them if we see something that we don't like or it's an issue. But the challenge is it's something that is, if we were going to have an impact on it, we would have been able to have the impact before it was put together and put out to the public. So my view is we're just trying to help.
Now, do you find you have difficulty ever working with the contractors to get them to stay on schedule? Is that ever an issue?
I would say that every contractor has an agenda and a goal to try and finish the job as quickly as they can and make as much money as they can at the same time. The challenge is there's a lot of moving parts, and sometimes they miss some of their moving parts and they hide them. That's one of the things we do is we expose those things early to try and catch them so it doesn't become a problem.
Okay.
So a lot of our projects, we get ahead of it.
Okay. Now, will you have someone that's going to be on site at the Civic Center at all times, or how is your contract going to work?
Our contract has worked where we have a time and materials contract with rates to deliver services, and we are on call, essentially. There's no value to having us sitting on site all the time. There's no expectation that we're going to have somebody here. I'm basically the responsible person. When I met with the committee, I basically said I'm committing myself to make this happen. One of our other principals, Jeff Moak, he lives in the city, so this is really important to him too. And so we're going to be at the meetings that we're asked to be at. We're going to do walks that we're asked to do. We're going to be on site when we're asked to be on site, and as needed. So it's not a full-time thing. There's no expectations.
Okay. All right, those are my questions.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Hamilton.
So I've been an advocate of this contract and services. I've met with a licensed architect who reviewed some of the drawings and things at the city of Newport Beach. I think my favorite example that he gave was they have curved walls in their council chambers.
Sure.
But they have flat screen TVs.
Exactly. Well, they didn't have the curved TVs at the time.
Yeah, you can kind of figure where his comments were there.
Absolutely.
Another item he said related to that were some of the wiring is now visible. If you have kind of like a false wall that the council can see, it can hide some of those things and keeping it open. But from the audience point of view, anyway, so. I also met with the consultant who did the after-action review for the city of Newport Beach, and having their input, I advocated to staff to go forward with this RFP process. So I'm very excited that we are here at this moment, and it's not just another set of eyes; it's a crucial second.
I hope so.
Set of eyes.
That's the intent.
What are your plans on, do you have, let me say it this way, one of the concerns I have is the efficiency kind of the study. Do you think we're too far along to have any input into the efficiency and the layout and organization?
No, I think this is about the right moment when you're at this point where you still have the ability to impact the design before it goes out. So yes, I think that the idea is never to redesign the world, right? And the goal is not to come in and say, well, I've got a better way to do this or we got a better way to do that. There's been a lot of input. There's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of key people that have invested a tremendous amount in trying to deliver this facility. And so the goal is not to come in and say, look what we have. The goal is to sit back and say, okay, this is the goal, this is the design intent, this is the plan you guys have, and how do we help make sure it gets delivered the way you guys expect it to be delivered? That's the number one thing. And so in that case, this is a good time as any. And we come into projects at the very beginning when they're greenfield, when they're literally just a pile of dirt, and we come into them when they're half constructed. So the timeline is really, as soon as we get in, it's better. That's it. Whether it's it improves the project.
Second, I want to thank staff for getting this queued up. I really do appreciate that. One of the items that I think was brought to my attention is also the staging. One vendor coming out at the same time, if, let's say, electrical and plumbing come at the same time. And so that's one thing that, Bernard's might not necessarily, let me say, others like Bernard, not Bernard's, might not necessarily have that in tune, scheduling, staging kind of, and so are you going to?
We're definitely going to have some, if based upon the request, we're definitely going to have some impact on how the project is coordinated. So how you coordinate the locations, how you coordinate all the work that come together to make sure that there's discussion. If we need cranes on the site, where are the cranes going to go? just review that to say, hey, do you have a swing problem? Do you have an issue with concrete? Do you have all these different areas on a daily basis as you build a project. There's so many opportunities for touch points and failure. And sometimes it just takes someone to say, hey, how about this? And then all of a sudden the people, they're smart, they just hadn't thought about it. And then what happens is that they rise to their best level and we get it done.
Some people that I've heard say that an owner's rep can sometimes quadruple, maybe up to even 10 times the amount paid to them, bring that kind of value to the project by doing the things that you're doing, saying, hey, this change order really was not the city fault, but it was actually the contractor's fault, and that's not one we're going to approve. Do you feel like that? What kind of range would you say that the value, if you're at 1, would you say the value you provide could be up to 5, 10 times, 2 times? Where do you kind of?
Well, since you like
half, 50%.
Since you're like poetry and you're a poet and things like that, let me tell you just a little sideline here. So if I leave my house right now, if I leave my house and I take Waze to here to the city council chambers, how much time am I going to save if I know that I'm taking Waze and I'm getting there the most efficient way possible? I can't tell you how much time I'm going to save, but I can tell you it's the most efficient way possible. What our goal is to be helping you to deliver this project in the most efficient way possible, and make sure your scope is all there, and make sure your budget is preserved, and make sure that grand opening happens when you expect it to happen.
So one of the things, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, you said you were on call, and so I don't want you to just run wild, but at the same time, I don't want you to have limitations where if there are areas of efficiency that you identify and maybe you get a red light from staff that you're on call. You see what I'm saying? You're not given that opportunity to proceed. So how do you handle that kind of on-callness?
So in our organization, one of the hallmarks that we have heard over the years is we take ownership of the project. So we treat the project like we own it, like we own from the contractor side when we're working for them. Our contractor clients say we act like we own the company because we do things, we communicate things that we see that an owner would see. I've been an owner of a construction company years ago. And so we treat the project like we own it. So there's times where we may come out and walk the site and nobody knows we're there and we'll never even send a bill for it, because I'm interested in making sure the project gets delivered on time, make sure the scope is right, and make sure it meets all the risk issues that you guys have. We have a moniker for our company. It's called Construction Risk Management. It's not necessarily like insurance, but we're managing the risk of the project development and process. So if there's something where we see that there's an issue, where staff says, we don't want you involved in this, we want you to pull back from this, but we believe that there's a significant risk to that, we're going to be communicating that to staff very, very strongly to say, hey, it's really important you do this. In the other side, if we see something where staff says, hey, we want you to sit in these 16 design meetings, I'm going to sit back and say, that's not your highest and best use for us. So let's sit in the first 2 or 3, see how they're going, and if they're going fine, maybe we'll do touch points and check in once a month or something like that. So it's really about the right fit for the project and spending no more than you have to spend to be able to achieve the objective. So the budget is the budget. The budget is really not really relevant to us.
So, Mr. Powers,
yes,
we want to say we want it to be on time and on budget, and I'll motion that we accept your contract.
I just have one more. I just want to say that staff, we have trust in staff that they're going to do a great job. I just want to give you an out, and maybe we can trade contact information. Ultimately, we are the elected owners, even though they're the staff owners. We're the elected owners. So, if you do have issues, I want you to feel free to. Not every time, but if there's something material, I want you to feel free to be able to contact us directly.
Yes, sir.
So what I think he's saying, we want you to be proactive, and there's been a motion made, and a question, please, Councilman Gardner.
I don't think you answered Councilman Hamilton's question, which was basically, what's the trade-off? If we end up paying you $300,000, are we going to save $300,000? Are we going to save $100,000, or are we going to save $3 million? Is there any way of estimating to us what the value of, the ROI is?
There isn't. I'll just be frank. This is part of what we do. I'm frank about these things that I can't measure for you because we don't know what the scope and what the risks are and what the challenges are. But I can guarantee you that if there's a place where we are on the project and we see something that is going to be a cost saving for the city, we're going to identify it. And I can also tell you if I see something that doesn't make sense in the design that we believe will be an element that we can reduce in size, reduce in scope, or find some other way to solve and get it done sooner, we're going to present that and try and help the team facilitate it. But the question is, I can't tell you how much money that it's going to be or not going to be. The last thing you want is someone who's going to stand and try and squeeze a nickel, a dime, or quarter out of everybody to justify their fee. So that's unfortunately, I can't answer that question that way, but I can guarantee you that I will give you 100% of the ability that we have to be able to save every penny we need to.
And is there anything that you've seen in the plans that worries you now?
Nothing that I've seen so far, but we have not spent much time looking at any details because it hasn't been available to us. So we've walked the site. I've been on the site a couple times. I've looked at it. I don't see anything in the concept that is a concern for me. I'm not having any problems.
And what exactly, you say what you're going to do. It seems to me that's pretty much what Bernard's and everybody else is going to do. Keep the project on time, keep it in the scope, avoid the risks. Why isn't Bernard's going to handle that?
So in the scenario that we have, Bernard's is responsible for developing a construction schedule. Bernard's is responsible for procuring the contractors. Bernard's is responsible for making sure the submittals and all those other things are actually done and turned in, and the project works and construction starts as it should. But one of the challenges, there's an experience level that sometimes we are the ones telling people you need to work on this immediately. That doesn't need to be worked on for another 6 months, so focus on this. So there's some benefit that we bring in that level. Additionally, with Bernard's, we actually have been in this role, specifically with Bernard's. So there was a project in Newport Beach, it was a private development, where we were asked by the owner to come in and help guide Bernard's and help them. It was a very collaborative effort. And so we worked on the owner's side to help Bernard's deliver the project. And we worked with their schedulers. We worked with things on trying to work phasing out to help. So it's advisory. You know, it's not that we're not going to sit back and review the submittals, and we're not going to go through and do the estimates. But we're going to sit back and say there's an issue with this estimate. Something doesn't feel right, and let's figure this out.
Since you've worked with Bernard's before, did they have some characteristic deficiencies that we should be aware of?
Can I plead the fifth? 43,560. That's how many square feet are in an acre. I don't know. You know, I can't advise on that. Yeah.
I think a better way to say it, just to interject,
If you have a better way, sure.
companies like Bernard's don't have incentive necessarily. Their incentive is full employment. So if they're going to make more money by having people out longer, they're not necessarily going to be concerned about the change order. That's not on their dime. They might even, I'm not saying Bernard's, I'm just saying there are companies who may have incentive for change orders. That's another way that they can make profit. A lot of construction profit is in the change order. So that's kind of where I see the value.
That's not been my experience with Bernard's. Okay. They want to partner.
And I'm just saying companies like Bernard's.
No, that's not my experience. I think your hire of them was not a bad decision. So I mean, I think it's just some additional support.
You know, Councilmember Gardner, ultimately, I think you're really asking more global questions about why is this needed on this project. And so I feel very comfortable in our recommendation to go to an owner's rep. When we first started talking about this project, we chose the multi-prime delivery process, and we purposely did not choose the multi-prime delivery process at risk because we didn't want our construction manager to have some sort of major financial incentive in producing this. We wanted a neutral party. And we believe we have that with Bernard's. But this is an extremely complex project. We have 3 buildings going up. We have a parking structure. We're also coordinating with the development that's going to occur on the other side of Civic Center Drive. There's a ton of moving parts here. And in certain situations, there's going to be situations that come up where we, as the city, are going to be asked to make a judgment call. There's not going to necessarily be a right answer. There's just going to be many choices to reach resolution on a given issue. And that's really, I think, the benefit of the owner's rep. It's somebody to give us that third-party guidance when we're getting differing results from all of the consultants that are working on this project, or there are just different roads we can take in reaching a resolution to something. We want that independent expert opinion that can help us with that, because as staff, we don't build 3 building complexes. It's a once-in-a-career kind of project. So that's kind of the first part. And also, I feel very comfortable recommending this because as a cost, it represents a fraction of 1% of our $72 million project. So for me to recommend this, to buy that extra insurance, I think it's money well spent. It's another set of eyes that can give us advice and help us avoid problems that we might not have seen because we are so in the weeds on this project that, it's somebody who can take a step back and give us advice.
Okay, thank you.
Any other?
Just one final question. Without naming the contractor, do you know about how much the change orders for the city of Newport Beach were on their Civic Center? Or does staff know?
Just
$1.
It was extensive. It was
in the tens of millions?
Tens of millions.
Okay.
Okay, anything further? There's been a motion made to accept the contract. Is second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Godspeed.
Before we go on to the next item, I'm sorry, guys. I have a really bad cold. I got to go home. I wanted to stick for the really, really important stuff tonight, but I'm sorry I'm going to miss the rest of it, but I think I need to go home.
Okay, we wish you Godspeed. Get well. Thank you for sticking with us.
Agenda item 11, updated discussion regarding wireless development, submitted by Assistant to the City Manager.
Mayor and members of the council, we have a presentation tonight from our Assistant to the City Manager, Carlo Tomaino.
All right, thank you. Good evening again, Mayor and members of the City Council. As you know, staff has provided an agenda report outlining the available processes that may be used by wireless carriers regarding the use of the public right-of-way for small cell deployments. So recent developments, including a contract award to a company specializing in the marketing and leasing of wireless assets, and a request from Verizon Wireless regarding the potential execution of a master license agreement with the city, have warranted further clarification from the City Council this evening. Given that wireless carriers have the potential of initiating their review process from multiple sources, the City Council's direction this evening will provide important clarification regarding these deployments to both our wireless carriers and our consultant 5 bars. Tonight, staff is seeking direction regarding 2 specific issues. The first is a request from Verizon Wireless to execute the existing master license agreement. And the second is the City Council's preferred deployment process for future small cell sites. Staff has detailed the potential options relative to these 2 policy discussions for your consideration this evening in the report. But to provide further information and clarification on this item, we've invited representatives from Southern California Edison, 5 bars, and Verizon to attend this meeting. I believe we have representatives from 5 bars and SCE in the audience. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm certainly happy to answer questions that you might have. Thank you.
Do we have anything from the public?
We've had no requests.
Council?
So my main concern is just that with this new agreement that we have, that everything that was in place continues to move actually at a faster pace than it did before. And I think there's probably a variety of reasons why things couldn't have moved more quickly in the past. Some of it could have been tied to the legislation itself. Some of it could be just the amount of staff time that you all have. But that's my main concern. And so things that are already in the process, I'm really concerned about handing off to someone who basically starts back from square one. Not to say that they don't have expertise in the area. That's exactly what they do every single day. They have more expertise than we do as city staff, but they still have to be brought up to speed. And so, your first request providing direction regarding the Verizon Wireless part, that's exactly how I feel. I've also heard a few stories about some of the issues with regard to pole size, that when the poles are being swapped out and new ones are coming in, that the poles are bigger. I'd like to kind of understand what the staff's perspective is on that, because some of the feeling from the wireless industry has been that that's been a little bit of an impediment. and they feel like they don't have much to do with that because the size of the pole is being determined by Edison and not by them, and yet somehow their understanding is we don't really like the size of the pole. It seems like they're caught in the middle. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but I'd like to get a more clear understanding of that. I don't know if it means we have to tear up sidewalks more because they're, you know, a few inches in diameter bigger, and if that's our concern or what they might be. So if you could just explain a little bit of that, I would appreciate it. And those are my comments for now.
Sure. Okay, so in response to those questions, we haven't had the opportunity to review SCE's design. They have a couple of different standard designs. We have a representative that can speak to these issues in a moment here. And I know that they're working on additional designs to accommodate different types of wireless deployment because of issues maybe raised by some of the wireless carriers, right? Obviously, the bigger the pole, the more construction that there is likely in the public right-of-way, and the more obvious it might be to somebody who's walking by that that's a wireless facility. If you're not using a really slender, consistent-looking pole with, but having said that, we haven't had the opportunity ourselves to process applications in that fashion to understand if there are really any impediments with those standardized designs. So I think that at this time, maybe I might ask our representative, Alexandra, to speak more to that issue to see if she's had any feedback from the carriers specifically.
And while they're coming up, just some of my comments with respect to that. I think poles are ugly all the time, but they're a necessity.
Right.
And so we've all come to accept the fact that there's a pole every certain number of feet because it illuminates my street. I'd prefer that there was no pole at all, that it's, Harry Potter land or something, and there's like a lantern floating in the sky, right? That would be cool, but, it's what's necessary. And I guess what I'm trying to convey is that if Edison is working on a pole that is more slender and meets the design preference that we have, but it's going to take 6 or 12 months to actually be installed, I'm concerned about the continuing impact that not having these small cell sites up is having on all residents. More and more I'm seeing in my own home that, okay, I dropped, right? The LTE network dropped because it's just over capacity, right? And it's going to happen more and more. It's moving at a very rapid pace. I'm guessing this Christmas might be called the Internet of Things Christmas, and the kind of impact that's going to have to residents could be very, very significant. Even just in December, January, February. So I want to see deployment as quickly as we possibly can. That's where all my concern really lies. And so I'm just looking at what are all those impediments, just like we had the owners. I'm trying to be like the owner's rep for residents when it comes to this particular issue of having access in homes when they're not on their Wi-Fi networks. So. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Martin, and I work for Southern California Edison Carrier Solutions. So for all of the Edison assets, whether they're utility towers, Edison properties, or the streetlights, the carriers all have master agreements with Edison for the various types of installations. And those applications all come through our business unit because that's basically what our unit does, is we handle all of the carrier installations on Edison assets. So to the first question you had about the streetlight size, all of the streetlights that exist in all of the cities none of them are designed for a cell site. None of them are structurally built. Their foundation, the pole themselves, they're not designed for a cell site. A cell site pole that Edison designs, it's one pole, two designs. They're round, concrete, and they are beefier than your usual pole. But the specs have been sent over, so he can share all that information with you. But it has all of the measurements, what our diameter is, what the foundation size is. But it's all designed so that inside that larger pole is a conduit or an area for multiple conduits. So the Edison power for your light is one conduit, the carrier's power, and then the carrier's fiber. So there's actually 3 conduits. Those existing streetlights you have out there don't have that kind of space. They can have one conduit, which is the power you get to light your light. under the LS1 tariff rate. If it's Edison-owned, it's LS1. If it's city-owned, no meter would be LS2, and there are different rates that are subsidized by the ratepayers to some degree. LS3 would be city-owned, but with a meter, an above-grade meter. So what I understand, I live in Lake Forest as well, by the way. What I understand is that you guys have been decommissioning individual poles that are owned by Edison. When that happens, that whole pole gets removed by Edison, and so do all the utilities associated with it. So then you guys apply for a new pole, so the carrier applies on your behalf, and they set whatever pole you're asking them to set. But it still has to be structurally sound, and it still has to have the utility that Edison puts in to light your pole separate from the carrier's utility. So it still has to have a big enough space inside, so whatever the carrier's installing is larger in girth than your standard streetlight is anyway. The streetlights are pretty far apart, 100 feet, give or take, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. So it's not like someone's going to see these two poles sitting side by side and go, that one's a couple inches wider. They are shaped a little different. They're round as opposed to octagonal concrete. Edison is currently in the process of reviewing an additional pole, which is octagonal prefab concrete. It's going to be larger in girth than the ones that we're currently installing, but for regular streetlights. But I don't know what the exact size is yet because we don't have that structural back. And even once we get the structural, it is Edison, kind of like a city. It takes a while to get through things. So we have a large process to go through and to see if Edison is even willing to create a part number and keep in stock those particular types of poles. So we do have a standard pole. It comes in 23 feet to the top of the pole and 29 feet 6 inches. And that's what the carriers are applying for. The process to get through Edison for the design is not very long. They have to first submit. If they don't submit, it takes a little bit longer. A lot of the apps that you guys have coming in here, they have not submitted to Edison. It is an Edison-owned asset, and they have not contacted us. So the first step is they submit a bulk application. It's a big spreadsheet that has all the sites that they want on it. I look at that to make sure it's an available pole and that it actually is set in a way that we can replace it with a cell site. We have to keep the GO95 separation in line. You know, they can only be so many feet away from utility lines, so many feet away from third-party lines. Does it infringe on the ADA ramp? Is there sidewalk furniture? We look at all of that. So they send me photographs of that pole, also a KMZ screenshot from the Edison KMZ, to make sure that it actually truly is an LS1 pole, because we won't obviously approve something that doesn't belong to us. So we look at that, and then I preliminarily review it. It takes me 10 days, give or take, depending on how many I get at any given time. And then I send them a preliminary review and say, go ahead and submit me plans. This pole looks okay. Or this pole has restrictions on the left, so you need to go to the right. And it has to be set a minimum of 3 feet from the existing pole so that the existing pole can remain in place and lit while the new pole is being developed. And once it's set and ready to light, Edison will decommission the original pole so that there's a 0-day outage, because it's about safety. We want to make sure that even though the pole is maybe not the most attractive, it does provide light and safety. And as little risk as possible to the people that are in the area. So they submit the plan, we review it, you guys review the public right-of-way, that's your purview, or your planning department's purview. We make sure that the pole is shown correctly, that they're showing the right height, they're showing the right separation, that they're showing our foundation, not overlapping the foundation of the existing pole, since it still has to remain while the new one's put in. There has to be a little bit of separation. If there's a commercial driveway, there's a 4-foot setback. So if it's too close to go that way and there's an ADA ramp on the other side, then they have to go on the other side of the commercial driveway, in which case the city may require a lighting study because it's too far away and the light may be different. Edison doesn't require the lighting study. The jurisdiction, if they want it, would need to require that. And then that's all part of the application the carrier submits to the jurisdiction. Once we review the plan, make sure they call out the street light properly, that they identify where it is, the site reference for the carrier, the separation of the poles, the elevation showing the separation, and which Edison structural they're looking for, because there's 4 of them. There's different heights, whether they go all-inclusive in a canister on top, which is a maximum of 60 inches in height, or 66 inches, depending on the carrier, and a maximum of 24 inches in diameter, or they go with a 36-inch canister with the radio units sticking out on the side. They kind of look like little elephant ears. They stick out, and the ports that are up at the top. The new poles also are designed with 4 ports. The current poles have 1 port. Unless it's in the median and it's a dual mast, it has 2. But the new poles have 4. So if it's a single or a dual mast pole that they're replacing, that it gets replaced with the same number of masts, and then the other 2 side ports are for the carrier's radio units. They're kind of like a small box. Each carrier has a slightly different design because they have a different manufacturer. They're covering a different spectrum. We can't really mandate that they have the same equipment because that just doesn't work. They have different contracts with providers, manufacturers, different systems. So they can't all fit in exactly the same design. It's the exact same pole, but slightly different design on the pole. So we review the plan to make sure that they're providing to the jurisdiction the design that we're approving for that carrier. Now, that doesn't mean that you as a city have to approve that design on the top. You may say, I don't want your radio units on the side, I want them all in the canister, which means the canister gets taller. Or one jurisdiction is asking that they set the radio units underground in a vault underground. Every jurisdiction has slightly different requirements. But we go and say, you can submit this design to the city because it is one of the 3 or 4 Edison-approved designs for you as a carrier. And not all carriers have the same approved design because they have different needs. But if they come to us with a design we definitely have not approved, we make them go back and fix it until it's at least one of the designs that we have approved by their contract. Then they come to you with a variety of letters. One would be a letter of authorization that says that Edison has reviewed this design and we are allowing the carrier to go to the city. The second is a consent letter, because right now you're our primary customer. We're lighting the lights for the city of Lake Forest. So the consent letter basically says that you as a jurisdiction are consenting to a secondary use on that light pole. Now, they are not entitled to use your LS rate. They have to have their own rate. So there's 2 different ways of doing that. There's either a general rate meter that can be set in the right-of-way for the carrier, and that's only for the cell site. Or many jurisdictions don't want any additional meters in the public right-of-way. So you have the opportunity to say, we don't want a meter. We want them to go with the WTR, which is the wireless tariff rate that's in the ground. It's in a small vault right next to the Edison utility portion. So that keeps everything in the ground. And these small cell designs are different than the macros in that the small cell is wholly enclosed on the top of that pole. A macro traditional streetlight design has equipment on the ground. You guys have probably seen some setback lease areas that can't be in the public right-of-way, but they are generally on private property adjacent to wherever that light pole is. So the small cell doesn't have ground equipment, which is different. We don't have any other sites like it. The streetlights are the only ones so far. So the consent letter signed by us and then signed by the city at the time that you approve the site. And that just says that you're consenting to the secondary use and that it doesn't cost you anything and it's not costing Edison anything to put this cell site up. The other document is a disconnect letter, and that letter is just identifying the site, the location, the pole number, the carrier, and who the city wants Edison to contact when they're ready to decommission the old pole. So that means the new pole's lit and they're ready to do the transition and take that down. They do take out the pole and they take out the existing foundation. So all of that gets removed and then it's reconcreted in or landscaped depending on where it happens to be located. Then those documents get signed, they get returned back to Edison, and that's how we do our contract with the various carriers. There's one other document, it's called a streetlight authorization form, which your Public Works Department, I'm sure, is very familiar with, because that's how you actually get a new pole, or how you change out a pole or decommission a pole, which is what you guys are currently doing. And that goes to the utility for the power design. And we have to have that signed by the city so that the utility group knows they've gone to the city in order to get some kind of review. And then when it's Edison-owned, and it's going to continue to be Edison-owned, when it's going to be decommissioned by you, we never even see the application. That streetlight authorization form goes directly to the utility to get the pole removed. Now, if you do remove those poles under the decommission process, which you're entitled to do, the requirement is it now becomes an LS3 pole, which means you have to have a meter for your lighting. Not for the carrier. The carrier has to have a meter too under the general rate, or you can have a dual pedestal, but it's still an above ground meter. So if it stays Edison owned, it remains LS1 unmetered. If it goes and gets decommissioned, you have to set a meter in the public right of way for yourself as well as for the carrier. So it's kind of a trade-off. Obviously, we have a business unit that handles this exclusively, just the carrier portion of it. That's the group I work for. And then we have the utility group, and we have a streetlight management group. And the streetlight management group, they're the ones who make sure that your poles remain lit, that if one gets damaged, it gets replaced in a timely fashion. That's what they do every day. That's all they do. They manage that. They manage the group, the bulk sale, which Lake Forest declined. Some jurisdictions opted to move forward with it, and many declined. I think some of it was waiting for that bill to pass to see what was going to happen, but the options are not available anymore. If they opted not to move forward, they cannot change at this point. And so they stay managed, owned by Edison. So I know you guys have put cell sites up because I've seen a few, and some of the carriers that are working with you have, I deal with them every day for other jurisdictions. We have about 1,500 current applications that I've processed for cell sites on Edison-owned light poles throughout Edison territory, and I have another 500 to look at. So I don't have any for Lake Forest yet because your current process is to decommission the pole. I don't want to say your process is shorter. It's different because basically you're removing everything and having all new design, which means a whole new utility design, a whole new pole, everything. We're going to replace the pole when it's through us, whether it's a wood pole, whether it's a concrete pole, or a steel pole, because none of the poles that are out there are designed for a cell site. So we require all of them to be replaced. If it's currently overhead fed, when the carrier replaces it through Edison, it will become underground fed because their cell site goes on top. We can't have it overhead fed. So if there's a concrete pole on either side or a steel pole on either side that's also part of that overhead feed, part of the Edison requirement is they replace those poles as well, and they become underground fed. So there's a lot that goes into these streetlights. I know some of the carriers have come and said they have about 30 sites. When we spoke before, the estimate based on what we're looking at is about 2% of the streetlights within any given jurisdiction. If there's an entertainment venue, that number might go up. And it'll go up next year and the year after until they've saturated the area. You know, they have, their RF engineers for every carrier designs what they need because they're very small rings. It's not like a macro site that's serving a very large area. These are very small, very condensed, and they need more sites in order to make it work. So having someone else plan it for them may not necessarily be what the carriers have in mind. The carriers already have radio frequency engineers that are doing those designs. So, and they've already got their designs. Yes.
So I think I'm going to ask you, did you have more, or was that?
First of all, I just want to say very thorough explanation. I really appreciate that. And, well, I really appreciate it. Just one question.
Sure.
You mentioned you have 1,500 that have been deployed in your Edison.
No, not deployed. 1,500 that I've processed applications
for. Okay. And what area does that? I mean,
It's
what
all
percentage
over,
would Lake Forest be out of that area? I'm just trying to get a.
What percentage is Lake Forest? It's
Yeah.
0.
Yeah. No, I understand there's 0 in Lake Forest. What I'm saying is, like, is it 800,000 people that those 1,500 relate to? 8 million people?
Oh, I don't know how it relates to people. That's kind of more a question for the RF engineers and how they design those rings and what they're trying to serve. For us, it's more of the streetlight themselves. We have 700,000 streetlights.
Okay.
So we have, like I said, about 1,500 I processed, where that means I've looked at the pictures, and in many cases, we've already approved plans and given them their documents. Not 1,500. I haven't issued approvals on 1,500, but probably, I don't know, and maybe 200 or 300 of those 1,500 so far. But that 1,500 is only since May that they've applied. And just because they applied doesn't mean they gave us a full submittal. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. They don't always turn everything in all at once. They give you what they want, and then you have to review the bits and pieces and say, no, I still need this, or I still need that, or this looks fine, except I want you to add this or add that. And then we issue them the letters. We don't approve anything that's not complete, because there's just so much involved, and we're mandated by the CPUC, so we can't skimp on anything. We have to go the whole way. Everything has to be very detailed.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Your question?
I was just going to say thank you very much. We talked a few weeks ago, Alexandra, and I really appreciate all your time. You answered a lot of great questions. Some I might have heard a little bit more here too, but I think the reminder about having the meter, a separate meter if we decommission. We actually have two processes, and I guess this question is for staff. And thank you for coming tonight too. Even though the drive, I know you said
It's
you
right
lived
up
off
the
of
street.
a certain street. I won't say which one it was, but it rhymes with Peachwood. Anyway, the question I have is that, is someone from Verizon here too?
There's someone from 5 Bars here.
No Verizon? Okay. So we undertook a process. I've been very interested in this whole wireless reception and the issues that we have in the city. Since I was on the Planning Commission with Mel, I tried a few times to get it agendized, different ways. We finally got a councilman to agendize it, came back to the Planning Commission. I think I was on the Planning Commission when we passed it, and then came back to the council. I'm now on the council 18 months ago, and under the process of them going and applying, using Edison's right away and their equipment, at least for the small cell sites, they don't need Planning Commission approval. They can go that route, or they can go the route, like you said, the decommissioning process that I think was 2011. So, to me, it feels like the question you're asking, whether Verizon should go under the decommissioning or the route that we established 18 months ago, that's really up to them. Whether they want to go through the planning process and have Edison still own the equipment, or if they want to go and ask the city for decommissioning. We've established those two different things. If we were to say we want to do one, wouldn't we need to then kind of cancel the other process?
Can I ask that something? It's not the carrier's choice to decommission the pole. It has to be your choice.
Right.
Because you will own the pole. The carrier can't own a pole in the public right-of-way.
But if we allowed a carrier to make a choice.
Right now, the carrier is free to go either way. They can either engage with SCE, or they can go through our licensing process. In this case, Verizon is asking us, city, what is your preferred route for us? And so the city is the city council, in my opinion, and so that's why I'm asking for policy direction on how you'd like to direct Verizon. But Verizon is aware they're free to go on either path.
Just for the record, Edison's preference is that those poles don't get decommissioned. I think I told you before when we talked kind of why. In that great big long line of poles that are out there that Edison owns, you take one pole out of that circuit, and now it becomes yours. The first person that any person in the public is going to call, because that light is out, is Edison, because that's who lights the lights. And they're going to complain that Edison hasn't replaced the light in that pole, but it's not our pole anymore. But the city doesn't know, the people in the city don't know that pole doesn't belong to Edison. It is your right to decommission the pole for just about any reason that you need to decommission it. That wasn't what the intent was when that decommission right was granted, but it is your right to do that. But it does lead to other issues, like the public not knowing who owns the pole. And they're going to come to Edison and complain that the light's out. The carrier's not going to go out there and look at that light and make sure that it's lit. I mean, they're concerned about their cell site. They're not concerned about the light bulb. And now that becomes your responsibility, or 5 bars if they're managing those lights for you. But they're still going to call Edison first, and that looks bad for Edison. We don't need any help with that. So I think that while it is your right to make that decision to let them decommission, I think if you give the carrier the choice and say, pick your poison, what direction do you want to go, they're going to go with the decommission because they're going to want to work with you directly, even though they still have to go to Edison to get the utility. It's just a different process. I don't know if the city's signed a new agreement with Verizon or the other carriers yet, but I know they have master agreements with Edison for all of those things. But we would ask that if it's our asset, and these are our assets, that we at least get, if the carrier's going to be given the choice to go what direction, that they let us know that that's the decision that they're making on our poles, because it does affect us.
Well, and when we talked, I think you said that your master agreement with the carriers is $1,500 a year.
I actually didn't tell you anything about how much money it was.
Okay.
Because that is confidentiality agreements through, what is it, non-disclosure agreements
I'm
and
sure
all that
it wasn't
stuff.
you. It was, I don't know where I heard that from.
It's probably about the average, but I actually haven't looked at the dollar amount lately. But every carrier is a little bit different, but it really isn't a ton of money. It's
And I think
fairly
our rate
negligible, in
that
fact.
we've negotiated is
It's
something around.
significantly less.
I think it's $2,000 a year. So
Oh, is
I
it?
think the carrier would. I'm just confused why Verizon would come. When we have these two options.
I think it's because historically
need to
you
make
have
the-
done the decommission.
I think if I might just interject for a moment, the carrier is making a business decision. And what they're looking to do is whatever they feel the easiest entry into the market is, that's the option that they're going to pursue. So when we've talked to the carriers about this, the answer has been, well, we're going to work with the city if the city is the regulatory agency and the city can provide greater certainty in terms of these sites being approved and being deployed, then maybe the city becomes a more attractive option. So the carrier's really, it's the carrier's choice, and they're looking for the opportunity that can get them to the finish line in the way that they believe is more efficient from a business perspective. So, we don't have Verizon here to answer that question for us, but we're here to process these applications one way or the other at the carrier's choice.
Are you done?
Well, I
have a question.
Go ahead.
I actually have a question. Could you take a seat right there and bring 5 bars? You're with 5 bars? Yes. So our process right now, with us decommissioning, I think it was Castle that has like 7. Are there meters down below on the poles?
Yes, they are separately metered.
I live right by one of those by Pittsford Park, and I've never seen the meter. So where's the meter at?
Well, separately metered, it doesn't necessarily mean the meter has to go above ground. There's other ways to hide that kind of infrastructure if that's our choice to do, because we want to preserve the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right? So there's different ways you can go about that. But I think the point that Ms. Martin is making is that you change the tariff rate to LS3, and now that becomes an individually metered light pole. The aesthetic is a different issue that's handled through planning.
So, and your name is?
Greg Steininger, with 5 bars.
5 bars. So when 5 bars gets a location that the carrier wants to put a small cell on, you guys come in and do you guys have a standard pole that you use for decommissioned poles?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. We'll take a little bit of a step back because I think Mr. Tomino kind of, identified a couple things. This is a new process. It can be complex, and this is kind of why we partnered up. Keep in mind, 5 bars works as an advocate with the city with all 4 carriers. So Verizon's coming in, and they would like to work directly with the city under an MLA. When Councilman Robinson was talking about speed to market, acceleration, those are the kinds of things we do across all 4 carriers. So I just want to make that point. It's not working serially with one carrier at a time. We're working across the board to move things and accelerate that process. We don't build anything. We work with either using the city's asset or working with a utility with the city to help accelerate the process. So there will be conversations that Mr. Tomino and staff have with 5 bars. We will go out and work across those carriers, across all 4 carriers, because they're all going to want to come in. It's not just Verizon. It's not just Sprint under Mobility, T-Mobile and AT&T, and other Crown Castle and others. So that's what we do within the process. We need to take a little bit of a step back, and we're working with, again, with the city to really understand how we want to do this, and then we package it up, work with either utility and with the carriers to package it up and expedite it for the city.
So would you say your time as an agent for the city of Lake Forest would be speedier? Because the fact is that, as Councilman Robinson said, I've been on the council since 2010. I've been complaining about cell service in my neighborhood and along El Toro Road since 2010, and we still have nothing done yet. So it's all about expediency. We want to get community of Lake Forest hooked up with their cell phones.
Right. And I think Ms. Martin did a fantastic job, obviously, overviewing and highlighting the process and the way it would work in that environment. And as you look at what's happening with the carriers, Mr. Tomino said it correctly. For the carriers, it's speed to market, and how can I do it as cost effectively as possible. They're not as concerned about aesthetics. They're not wanting to maybe pay a premium, and these are areas where we work with the city. This is all we do. This is our sweet spot. We work with the carriers. We advocate on behalf of the city. We kind of become part of your staff so that staff is not looking at 50, 100, 200 applications at one time. We're working with planning, public works, to make sure that, to your point, we're looking at where within the right-of-way we can make this happen and how we can expedite the process. And it works very well.
So I know that in the newer part of Lake Forest Baker Ranch, a lot of those streetlights are owned, right?
Yes. So in the numbers that we've detailed in the report that talk about the number of streetlight poles that we have, most of those are along Catalina and Monarch in Baker Ranch.
So when we have a light go out, who do we it's our city owned? Edison doesn't service it, so
right.
Who services our streetlights?
We have a vendor through Public Works that maintains and services the streetlight poles for us.
And so when Hardcastle or 5 Bars or one of the other agents, do you guys put your own poles in, or do you guys have contractors do
No,
it?
as Ms. Martin said, when we work with a Verizon or a Sprint or a T-Mobile, 2 things will happen. They will either, in this case, if they're working on utility poles, it'll either be decommissioned, a new pole comes up, or the carriers will use existing city-owned property and put the antenna and the RF on that, or the carrier will come in and say, there is no existing pole here. They will build a pole, they'll deed it over to the city gets revenue for that asset specifically.
So if the pole is a standard street light, that's the hexagon concrete, doesn't have the infrastructure, do we pay for that, or do you pay for that, or does the carrier
pay for
the new street light?
The carriers will do the build, they will the RF, the power, they will work. That's their responsibility, and they're responsible for that.
Okay.
And by the way, the conversation we're having really has less to do with 5 Bars and our relationship with the city, and more what Verizon wants to do specifically, and the use of SoCal Edison-owned assets. But we're going to be working in parallel. Whatever decision you make with the city, aesthetically, manage from a revenue standpoint and expedite the process.
So do you come with, right now Verizon, correct me if I'm wrong, does Verizon have a map of Lake Forest where they need cell towers?
Yes, they do. They shared with us their immediate deployment plan, which is 15 to 20 poles, and then they have a more longer range, which is 2 or 3 years from now, for 50 poles, and then potentially more beyond that.
So does Edison or does Verizon, with their target point in Lake Forest of where they want their cell towers, you guys utilize that, and then we contract through our subcontractors to put the new pole in that would be have the infrastructure?
Well, I think, as Mr. Tomino said, each carrier has a map of pretty much every city in the country at this point for small cell deployment. For Lake Forest, all 4 carriers have their roadmap of what they want this city to look like. We do our own road mapping just to make sure that we're managing that process with all 4 carriers. The carriers come in, as he said, right now they've got 15 to 20 sites. Overall, they'll probably want 50 to 75, depending on the size of a city like Lake Forest, per carrier. And what we do is we manage that process, again, working as an advocate with the city across in parallel with all 4 carriers to make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing, it does what the city wants it to do. We have revenue generation that maximizes what the city's looking at, but that's fair and reasonable for the carrier, and we'll work certainly with the local utilities as well.
So, with the projected 20 cell towers they want to put up their cell sites, how long would it take you to get
Could I ask, because I think we're going to be here at midnight and still talking about the cells. Are we going somewhere with this conversation, just so I can try to figure out in my mind what to think of and what to discard?
Yes.
Where are we going with this conversation?
If I might just to restate the policy direction that staff is looking for, there's 2 instances. Okay. The first is we've got a request from Verizon Wireless who's saying to us, we'll do whatever you want us to do, just point us in the right direction, right?
Okay.
And that means that potentially you could have use a city process that we've identified in the report and have the council authorize the execution of a master license agreement. After that, the application would go into planning. We would process that application under an admin site development permit, and then the city would work directly with Southern California Edison to decommission the poles that become those sites ultimately. Your second option is to have Verizon work with 5 bars. So they go back, work with 5 bars, and then come through the process eventually and get the sites deployed. And the third option, as it relates to Verizon, is to say to Verizon, no, please go to SCE and start their process. That's the first question.
Okay.
And the second question is more broad. How would you like to do this?
I think if we answer the first question,
Okay.
we'll have done a lot.
I agree. So I actually, if we have, it's to state right there, if we have a request
It was all very
right now,
interesting and very helpful, but
if we have a request, what would be the speediest way to do it? Is with 5 bars, or is that the process that we have?
Well, I would say that since we've already negotiated the master license agreement and that part is done, and we control our destiny relative to our admin SDP, that the city would be slightly faster at this point, because there's no going back at all in the process.
And so, but then moving forward from that point on, it would be 5 bars, be our agent?
It depends on the location of the site. So if you're talking about city-owned assets, because there's a relationship between the city and SCE, if you're looking at using SCE-owned sites, and SCE in the city, vice versa. So we're each relying on each other's entitlement processes to get this through. If it's a city-owned asset and we're working with 5 bars, that's probably the fastest thing, right? But anytime you're working with another agency like SCE, there's going to be an additional entitlement process. The issue that we brought to your attention is we don't own a lot of city assets. So some of these sites are going to have to go on SCE poles if you want to go that route.
But for this one, when we're talking about the negotiated agreement we have now, that started...
That started a while ago, and we finalized that master license agreement in June, and then that process was suspended by the carrier because of SB 649.
SB 649?
And I do want to make a comment on SB 649. It has gone back to the Senate for review, the California State Senate for review. So it's going to roll back in probably January time frame. Just more of an FYI.
I've heard it's recycled.
I just read that tonight, that it went back to the Senate.
Personally, I think that the process that's faster would be to go straight to the planning department, because you're going to have to review them anyway. Verizon, all those carriers have licenses already or agreements, MLAs, their own MLA with Edison. Edison might take a little time to review them, but they're going to do that same review and removal. I think with the removal decommissioning process, I think that is going to be longer than them using their existing MLA agreement. The carrier's existing MLA agreements and just getting... So I guess I have a question. And to answer the question, I don't really care. I think...
I got lost.
To me, if Verizon wants to pay more for the $2,000 on our MLA, I think it's up to them. But we did sign an agreement with 5 bars, and so, for at least it was my comments that we use them for city-owned property. That's the
and one doesn't negate the other. You bring
Right.
up a great point. It's
Right.
they're not mutually exclusive at all.
Right.
Depending on, so you can make whatever decision.
I mean, if they kind of have their maps already, anyway, if it's up. But I'm trying to get to the understanding. So I talked to Nikki, our planning manager, and she said that she's received 2 applications, approximately, maybe 2 approvals. And 18 months ago, we changed and completely simplified the process for carriers to come into the city. I just don't understand why, if everyone's got this map, all the carriers have these maps, they're chomping at the bit. And I've actually had a couple tell me, hey, I've been delayed a year, I've been delayed 9 months. Why is it taking so long? Why haven't they gone directly to the planning department? The comments I'm receiving from them are that the city's requiring an MLA.
The city's requiring an MLA when they do not present the letter from SCE saying they have property owner permission to move forward. So if they came to the city with the paperwork that was referenced earlier, indicating they were going through the SCE process, we would process it that way. So the pre-application we received that we provided a copy to the council tonight shows that they applied to the city without that letter, so they fell into the MLA category.
So I make a motion that we approve those MLAs through the city and move forward.
So
say
for
those
clarification,
MLAs.
are you saying that for Verizon, so answering the first question, for Verizon, you would like to have the direction be that they go with the city MLA?
Well, that's what the process already started.
Yes. Okay, so is that your motion at this point?
And really, the whole thing about that is a question, too, is they could sign the MLA and still decide to go through the planning process.
When you say the planning process, what,
Submit directly to the planning department and not use the MLA.
you mean the Edison process?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused, because when you say the planning process.
The site
I'm-
development, what is that thing they apply to? Nikki?
Yes, through the Edison process. They could, if they.
5 bars, can you please come to... Can we ship that over to the 5 bars as our agent? Can they handle the MLA as is and just move forward?
We already have MLAs also with all 4 carriers. But it really is a kind of a subjective decision based on how you want it. If it's already moved down the path for those 15, 20 sites, but we could certainly manage that, but that's ultimately up to you all.
I just moved that 5 bars continues down the process. Yes.
They can only manage city-owned assets.
Yeah, that's right.
So if
That's
they're
right.
currently Edison-owned assets, they do not have the right to manage those poles.
Okay.
You would have to officially decommission them in order for 5 bars to have the right to manage them. They can't expedite it through the Edison process.
That's correct.
There's
Yeah,
nothing
that's
they can do
separate and
with Edison.
distinct from, that's right, that's a non-city-owned asset.
Right, so
That's
even
correct.
if it's a city-owned asset, or even if it's Edison-owned and you want to decommission it, they still have to go to Edison to get the utilities, they still have to go through your planning department. Then the MLA is a master license agreement, or a master lease agreement, depending on how you want to do it. It has nothing to do with planning. It has nothing to do with expediting the project. It's strictly how you collect rent and the terms of your agreement. So even if there is an MLA for Verizon that they fully negotiated but haven't signed, right? So it's not even executed. So you still have to do one of those with every carrier that wants to come in and build a site on city-owned assets, whether 5 Bar manages it or whether they don't. You still have to have an MLA because it's your asset. So if it's an Edison asset...
Are you talking for city-owned assets or non-city-owned assets?
City-owned assets.
For city-owned assets in an agreement with 5 Bars, we actually, they sublet the assets to us, and we work on behalf of them with the, so it's a different, that's separate.
But for Edison,
Edison
ones
it's
that you're
different. It's
decommissioning,
separate. That's
you still
separate.
have to have an MLA of some kind, which is just a lease agreement. But 5 Bars doesn't have anything to do with Edison
No,
asset
we do
as it
not.
stands.
That's correct.
Okay.
And they
That's
cannot
right.
expedite it.
Thank you for clarifying.
But if the carrier goes to Edison, then you get the money, because it's your pole and you keep the pole. I'm asking like you do.
we do.
But if they come to us and we decommission the pole and we take over the pole, then we get the money.
Right.
Well,
That's
theoretically, yes.
I'll make a motion that we keep it on the city side.
But is that the non-city assets or there's two sets of assets here, non-city assets?
Well, it's been the policy of Lake Forest right now to decommission poles and put them, and then recommission them in our name. So the effect is that then we'll be in charge of putting the LED lights up there, or if there's a problem, Public Works would be handling them.
I just have 2 more quick questions.
I just would make a motion that we stay with the policy we have, move forward.
When someone applied, like you said, did they know that they have the other option?
Yes.
And that they probably could have had the pole installed
Right.
and in operation if it was a year ago that they were going?
The carriers have pre-negotiated license agreements with Southern California Edison.
Right.
So they are fully aware that that is an option. As I mentioned, they're really seeking whatever they think is the most expedient option to get these things deployed.
That's why would they wait? I mean, I
have
have conversations that say the exact opposite of what you just said.
Well, it's the
with
carriers-
2 different carriers.
Well, it's the carrier's decision to
Who think they're
go
stuck.
with SCE. They're not stuck. In fact, when the planning counter is usually the first point of contact, and if the carrier has actively decided not to go with SCE's process, that's their choice. For example, I just received a letter from AT&T on Monday, and in my view, I read that letter. AT&T is clearly exercising their right to use SCE's poles, right from the get-go. They know that's their choice. And what we're going to do is process that application consistent with their desire to do so. We won't make them go through a different process. If the carrier hasn't actively elected to do that, we're the only option left. So our process is designed to help them get through it if they don't want to use SCE.
But based on my conversation with Nikki, 18 months we've had this process in place. 2 applications and 2 individual locations. It's extremely frustrating to me.
I would say to that point that there have been meetings with development services, there have been reviews of plans, and those plans have been deemed to be incomplete. So they haven't been completed to the satisfaction of the city. There are various and numerous requirements, design criteria, location criteria. I'm sure Ms. Martin would tell you the same thing with SCE that go into this application. So if the sub-consultants have submitted applications that are subpar and incomplete, the city cannot approve those.
Okay, one more question. You said the city decommissioned these poles to put LEDs in. I'm talking some of the staff that we've had.
Well, in Baker Ranch, I believe they were new poles. There was, yeah, 7 were decommissioned. The Crown Castle ones were decommissioned. I believe the Baker Ranch ones were new installed poles.
They don't have to be decommissioned to have an LED.
So that's my question. Why would we have done, if I understand, I'm pulling on some information that I had with Alexandra, the LS1 rate is unmetered. So why would the city care if they're LED lights? If they're unmetered, I mean, I'm all for energy savings, okay? But why would we care what the light standard is if it's unmetered?
Our lights are metered. So the ones in Baker Ranch are metered. Therefore, we got 36% energy savings
So
for metering them and using LED.
My question.
If I'm understanding what you said,
You don't have to decommission it to get an LED. As part of the carrier, when they replace the pole through us, you can ask for an LED light, and that's what we put up. You have a choice of going with the same kind of light bulb that's already there, or choosing an LED. You just make that choice on the street light authorization form.
what I'm saying is if the poles were unmetered in the first place, why would we change them out and... It
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
The poles weren't unmetered. They were built and designed metered.
So why were they built with the meters when the LS1 rate is unmetered?
Because
Those poles weren't installed as LS1 poles. They were never owned by Edison to start with.
Right.
They're Lake Forest.
So why were they not owned by Edison in the first place?
They never are.
So developers build the poles, right? They develop it. They construct the whole system. And I'd have to go back. This was years and years, it was 5 years ago or so when the system was designed. But at the time, you could put in LED lights and meter them and get the energy savings. If you go with the unmetered rate, it didn't matter. Edison would charge you the same rate, whether it was LED or not. So we got a 36% savings just from the energy alone, let alone on the maintenance costs also.
I'll ask you more offline.
Okay, so my motion is to stay with the process with the 20 Verizon, but any further ones would go through our agent, Hardcastle. I mean, 5 bars, sorry, it's a long night.
For city-owned assets.
Okay, I think I have a second.
That would be city.
The second from Councilman Gardner. So with the
Mayor, I had a question for Mayor Pro Tem Basil, who's happily sitting at home right now. She wanted to know what's the cost when we decommission and then we take over the poles. Obviously, there's a cost. We're getting money, but there's a cost. She wanted to know what that cost was.
I think maybe Mr. Wheeler can answer that question more specifically, but my understanding is that the cost to decommission or the cost to maintain?
No, the cost to maintain.
To maintain is pretty low. We're talking about lighting the pole, providing any maintenance if it's necessary. There's a greater cost, obviously, if there's a car, for example, that strikes the pole. Then there's a replacement cost. But the day-to-day maintenance is pretty low.
And do we pay the decommissioning?
The carrier pays all of
The carrier pays it. Okay, so
It
then
doesn't matter if it's decommissioned or if it's done by us. The carrier bears the cost entirely of the development.
you're welcome, Mayor Pro Tem Basil.
Okay. Motion made, and seconded.
Are you answering your question, though, a preference? I mean, we're just making a motion that you accept, but you can accept it anyway if that's what their preference is. So I'm not understanding.
I'll just clarify. My interpretation of the motion is that in the immediate instance of Verizon, that we use the process that we've been using, we execute the master license agreement, and we process their entitlements through development services and take it through our regular process. That any future facilities going forward are all going to be directed, regardless of whether SCE owns them or the city owns them, to our consultant 5 bars.
Correct. That's the motion. All in favor?
So are we not doing the Edison route anymore? We can't get rid of the Edison route.
They would continue to have that option. The carrier can always come in, as I explained just with AT&T, and say, that's all we want to do, and we couldn't stop them. So we would encourage them to work with 5 bars, but ultimately it's their right to choose to do the SCE process. And
so what specific to this motion is different than what I don't understand?
What's different
They can do what this motion is meaningless.
When an additional carrier comes to us, we now have direction to send them to Crown Castle. I mean, I'm sorry. It's late.
5 bars.
My bedtime was about a half hour ago, and it's daylight savings. So, okay. Yes, so it gives us direction on what to do with the next carrier that comes along, and what your direction is that we refer them to our consultant 5 bars.
Correct. Okay, I'm calling for the vote, in a sense, because we haven't had our vote if we're going to continue on or not. It's past the bewitching hour. No, we're supposed to do it. No, 9:30 now. Well, wait till after the vote.
Okay, so I think what just bear with me. I thought the council's policy was to only do city-owned assets with 5 bars. So we're changing that, just to make sure, we're changing that policy that we just indirectly kind of stated, but I just want to make sure that I'm...
But I think, too. That was originally our policy for city-owned assets.
But we just literally made that policy like weeks ago.
Now we're adding, because they're asking us the question of non-city-owned assets.
City Manager?
In regards to our process with 5 bars, the next step with 5 bars is to present a list of assets that you would like them to market. And at that point, you can give us direction on whether those should only be city assets or if you're looking to include Edison assets as well.
Okay.
But that's in opposition to what this motion is. I thought I just heard that Carlos said all future MLA routes we're going to go through 5 bars. But you're just saying...
No, we're saying all future applications will route through 5 bars.
Right. Regardless of whether they're city-owned or non-city-owned, the carrier would still have the option of going through SCE if they want to do that.
But not through 5 bars.
Right. Because the issue with 5 bars is, as I pointed out in the report, we have a very low inventory of assets. We can create a few more if we agree to put in polls, but it's probably not going to be enough to satisfy the demand for wireless facilities in the city. So there's a limitation there that we need to address that, as a city manager pointed out, when we bring the wireless master plan back to you for review and concurrence, you can give us further direction. Whether you have if you have an issue using any of the SCE sites, that would be the point in time to say to 5 bars and the staff, really don't do it that way. But the
Are
issue
you
is,
saying then for city assets? Is that what you're... Is this what this motion is, for just city-owned assets?
No.
Well, then how are we going to decide in the future if it's not going to be... There's some...
I believe that the direction you're giving us is that for Verizon, you'd like them to use the MLA process, and that includes decommissioning SCE poles.
Correct.
So we would be taking on poles with that direction. And then in the future, anything else is going to be directed to 5 bars.
Correct.
5 bars will, to give you a fuller sense of what that means, 5 bars will come back to you as outlined in the contract that we signed to bring a master wireless plan. It will identify potential sites. And at that point, you could tell us, no, we don't want further poles to be responsible for, or we're okay with that because there's a goal for more coverage, or whatever. You can give us that more detailed direction at that point once you see it laid out in a plan.
That would be...
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the back of my mind from this long discussion, I got the impression, Councilman Robinson, I think all of us are more interested in expediting the process than in making money, if we could, choosing between those two things. So, and my assumption has been that adopting this motion is going to at least be equally expeditious.
I agree.
Would that be true?
True.
Okay.
Yes.
That was my understanding.
Good.
Motion fails.
All right. So with that, I'll make a motion that we move forward with the first part of that. So the first question, the MLA with Verizon, we stick with the city process, and I'll just leave the motion at that. So it's just answering the first question
from the MLL.
So how should we move forward with the MLA that was just about signed in June, right? For that specific case, and we follow the city process that we had. So I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Can I make
All
a
in favor,
substitute
please
motion?
Cast your vote, please.
If we I make a substitute motion that we just receive and file. Because really, your motion is just, if Verizon wants to go that way, they can. If they don't, they go the other way.
They're just asking for direction, so it's...
But I don't, we have two options. The carrier can decide.
Motion, are you making a substitute motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Receive and file.
It died on fail of a second. Died. The original motion is to carry on with the 5 PARS contract that was applied for.
No. It's...
Not the 5 PARS, Verizon, it's late. I mean,
The city process.
The Verizon process, or the city process for Verizon. All in favor?
Voting yes. Let's go.
That motion passes with Mayor Pro Tem Basil absent.
I'm just trying to...
Okay, that brings us to the city manager's report.
Wait, I'll make a motion that we extend, which we should have done a while ago, but I was in zombie land. So.
Mayor and members of the council, is there direction on the second question?
What was the second question?
The process for all future applications.
That failed.
No, that was the second question. Old 5 bars is the agent.
That failed.
I think my direction is, when you come back with the 5 bars, we'll consider it then.
Okay.
I'll make a motion of that.
Okay, it appears that we're finished with this item.
Didn't that motion fail? Isn't that what we voted on?
No, I think we were saying 5 bars do it now. I'm saying 5 bars do it when they come back and do the analysis and all everything.
I'll make a motion that we continue on with the contract with 5 bars as it stated with city-owned assets.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Please cast your votes.
City-owned assets.
We don't need a motion on that.
That motion passes.
Okay. City manager's report.
Wait, I make a motion that we make no further motions on this item.
Second.
I'd like to talk to you about wireless infrastructure. Maybe not. I do have a report tonight. It's very short. I'd just like to follow up on the strategic planning meeting that we had, workshop. I'd just like to let you and the community know that we will have a follow-up discussion to that. At this point, I'm tentatively planning to do that at our December 19th meeting in lieu of a closed session. It would be a public discussion for approximately an hour to do some follow-up questions from that strategic planning workshop. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Yes, I'll thank you too. Councilman Gardner.
Gee, I have a follow-up on the strategic planning thing. Boy, was that awful. I mean, we spent time and money and resources, and I didn't come out any more enlightened or educated than I went in there with. And I don't think any of the fundamental questions that the city is facing got addressed at all. So, and nothing they bring back is going to be useful either. I mean, it was a waste of time and resources. And not only that, but Councilman Hamilton used to make fun of us as issues would come up, and we'd say, we're going to bring it to the planning, to the strategic planning, we'll solve it in strategic planning. We put off solving a lot of stuff because we were relying on a strategic planning workshop that was going to be productive. This was the second least productive strategic planning I've ever seen in my entire life, and I've been to many strategic planning sessions.
Why don't we address this next year during the strategic planning?
And it doesn't bode well for more. It was, I don't even know what to say. It was so bad. The fundamental problems we tried to address, and there were dozens of them, just never got addressed. We're still left with them. We need to solve them, but I'm not going to recommend the strategic planning again. Never again. I make a motion that we never again hold the strategic plan.
I'd like to remind you agreed to no more motions tonight, so.
And that's it for me.
Councilman Hamilton.
All right, I went to Dunkin' Donuts, lots of grand openings, whatever they were. They were all important. I would like to see council consensus that we see if we can get lift-em funds, if we can spend all of our lift-em funds on developing a route with Irvine to relieve bake traffic by diverting it from Alton through the Veteran Cemetery. Veteran Cemetery. I think we have a real opportunity to make a big dent on Big Parkway.
Okay, there was consensus.
If we get one more, don't we get a bonus?
The consensus policy just requires 2 to place it on an agenda. It's going to be using one of your 4 for the year to discuss this at a future meeting.
But with 3, you get a report. So with 3, you get
No, actually, the policy was changed.
I can't remember.
Yeah, the policy was changed to, place it on the agenda. So it'll be placed on an agenda to discuss.
You don't need 3 to get a report.
Not anymore.
Is that it? Councilman Robinson.
Well, with Mayor Pro Tem Basil gone, I don't know whether I'll get a second on this, but I'd like to request consensus to have a discussion about the Boys and Girls Club so that we can have our up and down vote rather than the very brief discussion we had at the strategic plan. From a timing perspective, I'd be thinking late January, early February, and would be asking for some consensus there. I think just with all the holidays, it would be really challenging to have that conversation before then. So
I'll second that.
Okay. Nothing further? Okay, and with Mayor Basil, I'll go. I, too, attended the second opening of a Dunkin' Donuts in the city of Lake Forest. It was quite a sweet occasion because it's right there along El Toro Road in Rockfield. It's a drive-through, and I'm sure it's going to do quite well for us there. And it was in a piece of property that was without a pad, and now has a new pad, and so it's a great asset to the city of Lake Forest, and I was thrilled to see it there. And I think, like I said, as people are driving through Lake Forest or going from home here in Lake Forest to work, it's a great place to grab a cup of coffee, and so I think it's going to be busy in the morning, so I think it's going to do well. I'd like to bring back, I'd like to have staff move to have a community input information meeting on the Village Pond Park or here on Veterans Park. I think it's something that the people came to and wanted to express, and so I think that we had many public input meetings on the development of Village Pond Park and where we were going, but we failed to allow them in the discussion when we reviewed it and changed it. So it's been seconded. Okay, it's consensus.
I'm the second.
Okay. All right. And I have nothing further. Thank you, everybody.